It's time for Twit This Week in Tech. Harry McCracken is here, the technologizer. Jason Heiner, Jason Snell. It's old home week. We've got some great people on to talk about, of course, everything Apple announced on Monday at the WWDC, the new Android 16, and it's finally here, the arrival of quantum computing. That and a whole lot more coming up next on Twit.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Twit, This Week in Tech, episode 1036, recorded Sunday, June 15th, 2025. Apple Reflux. It's time for Twit, This Week in Tech, the show where we talk about the week's tech news. I like to bring in veteran technology reporters on this show. I think if you include me, we've got about 400 years worth of experience. No, it can't be that much. 50 times 4. I don't know what it is. Jason Heiner, how long have you been covering tech?
25 years.
Yeah, there you go. He's editor-in-chief of ZDNet now. It's good to see you, my dear old friend.
Be here. A pleasure, and with a distinguished panel, old friends of mine as well. So this will be fun.
You all know each other, which is cool. Harry McCracken, the technologizer. Now at Fast Company, how long have you been covering tech?
I started doing it professionally in 1991, so 34 years.
That's nice. I think I'm going to beat you all, but that's good. So we got 25, 34. That's 59. Jason Snell from sixcolors.com. How long you been in this business?
Depending on how you count, about 32 years.
Oh, so, my.
Well, 31, 32, something like that.
We're going past 100 because I've been doing this since the late 80s.
Well, I do have something I can pull out for cases like this, which is right after I got out of high school, which was 1982, I wrote a couple of pieces for creative computing. So
you got me beat.
In rare instances like this. Yes.
We're close because I wrote my first piece for Byte, I think was 85. I wrote for a couple of Atari magazines before that, probably 83. So we're close. I wasn't in high school. I was a grown man.
Compute Magazine paid me for a basic program I wrote when I was 14. But,
that's right. That counts.
That's about it.
That
counts. Didn't you just recently resurrect that program?
No, I don't think so.
Somebody I was talking to had done the same thing, and he got it working again.
No, that one's lost to history, although trust me, it's not that hard to make a blackjack program. It's very easy.
And which BASIC was it?
It was Commodore BASIC because it was on a Commodore PET, so there was no graphics. It was literally just
numbers.
Text. Before the VIC-20 and the C64, the Commodore PET had no graphics mode at all, so that was interesting. But yeah, that's I realized I type really fast in part because in the computer magazines of the early days, they would give you programs to type in. And so I got really good at typing without looking because I was looking at the magazine and then typing code in. And that's why I can type fast to this day.
I actually did an article on the history of BASIC where I interviewed the editor of Compute who decided to get rid of the listings, which for them was a big decision because they were the most list-centric magazine at the time.
Well, it was the bulk of the magazine was inscrutable code, basic code. There were no pictures. It was just code. I guess they could put some ads around it, though.
I mean, basic, so it was readable, but a lot of them still at the end, there were like 80 lines of data statements that were completely inscrutable. So.
Right.
Yeah. I wonder if ChatGPT can write code in BASIC.
I've tried to get it to write TRS-80 BASIC, and at least the last time I tried, it was terrible at it because
interesting.
I don't think I can tell one old microcomputer BASIC from another.
That's probably what it is.
If you're doing things like graphics commands, it was awful. Although I keep meaning to try to feed a lot of TRS-80 listings into some LLM to see if that helps.
It's a good idea.
I will say it does Common Lisp quite well because Common Lisp was standardized in the 80s, and so all the stuff it's reading, is the same. And it codes Common Lisp like a champ. Does Apple script pretty well too, right?
It does Jason? Apple script pretty well, and I can't verify how good it is, but I got it to generate some HyperTalk.
Ooh,
for HyperCard. Wow. There's some of that in there too, but it's basically the question is there enough on the internet as an example?
Right.
And if there is, it can do it.
But I like what you said, Harry, because it's not standardized. BASIC, there were so many different basics.
So many.
And the guys who invented BASIC were really unhappy about that. They really looked down on TRS-80
Kemeny
BASIC.
and Kurtz said there should be
AppleSoft, and they came up with something called True BASIC in the 80s.
I remember that, yes.
Which was a reaction to the fact that BASIC had become so unstandardized.
Let's not talk about the week's tech news. Let's talk about last century's tech news.
Old tech.
This is all an article I wrote for Time when BASIC turned 50, I think.
Wow. So last century in tech is
10
what
years
the
ago.
show is.
Last century in tech.
That's not a bad show. People have often asked me if I would do a tech nostalgia program because I think people like them. Some people of a certain age anyway like that. And maybe the youngs like to hear how hard it was.
It becomes history now.
Yeah, it's history compared to what they're doing. Well, everything old is new again. Apple has brought back Windows XP Aero to be the new Apple UI. Apple, of course, had its WWDC on Monday. Jason, you were there. So was our good friend Harry. You were one row apart at the Apple Park.
True. It's true, in the shade.
One thing that didn't get a lot of coverage, The Verge mentioned it. We didn't see it because we were watching a canned video, but you guys were there. There was a protester, was there not?
Yep.
There was
one. I was also there.
Oh, you were there too, Jason?
I didn't even see you.
Now I'm feeling left out.
I saw Jason from across the room, but unfortunately we didn't get to say hi in person.
No. I will never get an invite to Apple Park, but that's okay. A pro-Palestinian Apple employee stood up and apparently harangued for 30 seconds before being escorted out.
Yeah, I was surprised that it took them that long. I thought they would be a little more on guard, but it sort of took a little while where everybody was kind of looking at each other, all the security people like, well, what are we going to do with this guy? And then they took him away.
Craig Federighi was speaking at the time. He didn't pause, I hear.
After those Microsoft events, you would think that every big tech company would be on guard.
The difference was this was inside the Apple campus. I mean, pretty hard to get in.
I heard it was an employee who was about to leave.
Microsoft, for their 50th anniversary, was on campus, and they had protesters.
A lot of Microsoft employees are unhappy about Azure's involvement in the Israeli-Gaza Palestinian conflict.
Sabrina Ortiz, who was there also from ZDNet, is our AI reporter. She said she's been to almost all the developer conferences: Microsoft Build, Google I/O, WWDC. A couple other ones. She said this has happened at almost every one that she's been to. So
yeah. Less obvious at Google's Shoreline event and less even obvious at Apple's event, which everybody outside of the campus was watching on tape.
Well, it was an intro. So Tim Cook and Craig Federighi come out before the show and they say, "Hey, everybody," because there's a big group of developers and press there, and then they play the video. So the protesters started shouting in the last couple of sentences of Federighi before they rolled the video, and so we couldn't hear him. It was kind of ineffective, other than to acknowledge that there was a protester, and then they were gone. It was kind of I couldn't hear a word he was saying, and he was probably 30 feet from me.
Well, as with this show, life intrudes into tech sometimes from time to time. So this new liquid glass, it's funny how the reactions have been all over the place. Max Stories had an article calling it opinionated design.
That was one of the lines. I mean, that was like a summation of a bunch of the quick takes afterward.
Well, now after the fact, you guys have had some time to think about it. Most of you have probably installed the developer preview. I haven't, but you guys live on the edge. What do you think?
First off, it's a new design. It's always hard to judge. I'm trying to not rush in, because it's human nature to reject anything that's new.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that every new design is good. It really doesn't. But it does mean that I am less inclined to listen to people who see something and immediately say, "Oh, that's terrible," or who have been complaining about Apple's design trends for a while and say, "See, this is right." It's like, I don't think that tells us anything. I think you need to kind of consider that it's new, and that all of us have to kind of like drink it in and sleep on it a little bit and spend some time with it. And so, I think it is ambitious. I think it's interesting. I think they're kind of showing off their GPU power, that they can do some of this stuff. I think some of it is, I think it's pretty sometimes and ugly sometimes. And I have a real question about like what they're going to ship. But I'll tell you, if you've only judged it based on the macOS beta, it looks really bad on macOS right now.
Interesting.
On an iPhone, it looks really good. So, I mean, it's a work in progress in a way, and I wonder how they'll react how they'll react to the reaction to it. But I do think they needed a new design that was considered across all their devices. They really have been patching designs and importing one design language into another device that was based on a completely different design for quite a while now, and they really kind of needed a reset. I will expect that it'll be painful for a little while, but in the end, I'm optimistic about it, but like, I mean, it is a fresh coat of paint. That's what it is.
To me, it seems more than a fresh coat of paint. Like really everything's going to look a lot different. Yes.
It feels very Apple-like. That was my reaction to it, especially so I did it on iOS first, then iPadOS, then macOS. And on iPhone and iPadOS, it just, again, it felt very Apple-like, and the consistency was nice to Jason Snell's point, and then when I installed it on macOS, then I started getting a little uncomfortable. I was like, ooh, this is a lot different. I was like, this is I'm feeling a little, I felt the reaction that Jason mentioned, like, okay, I'm getting a little uncomfortable. I'm trying to give this the benefit of the doubt, but I'm still getting used to it there. It feels the most different on a Mac, I think, than it does on the others.
Bloomberg managed to get a think piece out of 2 data points, that and the fact that they have skeuomorphic icons in the Airbnb app to write an entire piece called "Big Tech is Dealing Flat Design a Death Blow. Skeuomorphism is Back."
I mean, to a point. I mean, it is. I mean, because it's trying to ape glass, it is a little skeuomorphic, although not like super skeuomorphic where everything
you don't have
is
green,
a 3D icon or
beige, velvet or anything.
Yeah. No, nothing like that. But I would say, yeah, this is to your point about it being not a fresh coat of paint. What I would say is, I feel like something like iOS 7, when they really redesigned it, was functionally a very different way of interacting with the iPhone in a lot of areas, and this doesn't feel like that to me. It feels, using an iPhone or an iPad, like I've been using my iPad. I installed this on my iPad that I use all day, and I had another iPad waiting just in case. It was a disaster. It wasn't. It works really well, but it also it looks different. It doesn't feel that different, and so it's not as disruptive, I think, to a user as some previous redesigns have been. It's more like a visual refresh than anything. There's more animations, there's a different look, but it doesn't like remap how you view notifications or something. Like they all still pretty much are a bubble that is in the lock screen, and like it's not that different.
Look at this though. This is an Airbnb icon from Austin Carr's article in Bloomberg. That is vivid. That is not skeuomorphism. Sure. That makes me hungry.
And Apple's not doing that, which is, so we've got 2 different kind of views of what the future of UI design might be. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's definitely going to be a work in progress until it ships, and in some ways probably a work in progress for the next few years, because there's just a lot they can do with this, and the devil is in the details. And anytime you introduce transparency, you're opening up the possibility of stuff being extremely hard to read, and you have to kind of balance the cool transparency with just being able to read the labels. Yeah. And I expect it to get better before the fall. But iOS 7 also kind of led to additional iterations and the updates that followed using that as the foundation. And I would expect something similar to happen here.
Accessibility was the first thing that got called out, because of the clearness of the notifications. Then depending on what your background is, they can be difficult to read. You can turn them off. You can go into accessibility and make them so that they are easier to read.
That'll be the test. How many people who don't have accessibility issues decide to go back to the old style?
That's exactly it. Because accessibility, I think it's great, and Apple has a commitment to it. And in some of their sessions this week, the designers said, we've designed this with some different looks based on your accessibility settings. And there's different ways you can reduce animation, you can reduce transparency. There's lots of things you can do, and that they've designed this with the accessibility settings in mind. So it's not an afterthought. It really is sort of like they want it to be able to scale. And my friend Shelley Brisbane, who writes about a lot of accessibility stuff, said back in iOS 7, there really weren't as robust a set of accessibility settings as there are now. And so it is something that, like, if you're really worried about it, there are probably going to be features under accessibility to change what the design looks like. There's a good argument to be made about, like, why is that under accessibility instead of just saying these are design settings. But it's fine wherever it is. All of us can probably take advantage of one or two accessibility settings. So I think I think it's fine. I think the question is exactly what you said, Leo, which is, does everybody have to turn on those settings, or does almost nobody have to turn on those settings? And in between those two, there's a spectrum. And I think that the more people have to resort to the accessibility settings, the more of a failure the design is, right? They want it to be something that most people will love as is. And if you don't love it, there's a setting, which is great. But if everybody is rushing to turn on, opacity in glass, then they failed.
How much of this is driven by Vision Pro and Apple's ambitions towards augmented reality?
I think not.
Okay.
I think they designed Vision Pro, and it was almost like a spearhead for this design, where they knew it was going to go everywhere, but they needed to start somewhere. I think that they were inspired by some of the choices they made, right? Because the design team had to design that from scratch. That was a new UI for them. And they I think, knew that they were going to do a big redesign. And so, sure, I think there's some inspiration from it, but I don't think it's tactical.
No, not backward inspiration, forward. Like, let's get people ready to start seeing through things, to having heads-up displays, things like that.
I'm skeptical of that. I think it's more about using their materials of their touchscreen devices than anything else. I do think that they built Vision Pro and they learned a bunch of stuff that they thought, well, this is kind of cool. We should do that for everything. And so that they have. I think that's so far out, Leo. Like, I mean, I just don't know if you're going to build an AR device in 5 or 10 years that you would make those changes today. Right. I do think it's possible. I know Mark Gurman of Bloomberg has been talking about this a lot, that they want to do a kind of like quote unquote all glass iPhone next year for the 20th anniversary of the iPhone, and that this is a good fit for that. I mean, I don't know about that story, but I will say, sure, I'm sure this design was created knowing what the next couple of years of products are that are in the pipeline. And if there's a folding iPhone, if there's an all glass iPhone, whatever that means, I'm sure they took those into account. But I don't. The AR story feels like way off to me.
So I have the same skepticism, but I was sitting with Scott Stein from CNET, my colleague there. And so I was sort of asking him this same question, like, how much do you think the design language is related to some of this, mixed reality kind of future? And of course, because he thinks about this stuff all the time, has been thinking about it for years. He said that in his mind, that a lot of the ways thinking about what do windows look like when you have it on any background, right? What do they, because you can't predict what does it happen when you have certain windows of different depths the way that you do in Vision Pro. So he was a little bit more on the scale of, like, he feels like this starts to lay the tracks for some of that, future when there are glasses, when there's a cheaper Vision Pro that is accessible to more people, and some of those devices, are more prevalent than they are today. I mean, we have to be honest, like, there are hundreds of thousands of people who have Vision Pros. There are 2.5 billion people using the other devices. So I tend to be a little more on the skeptical side as well, that's a long journey, from here to there. And yet I think it is compelling to think, like, okay, well, if we start to think about some of the design language and think of depth in different ways, then some of these things do seem to lay the tracks a little bit for that world.
Of course, that was perhaps the headline of the Apple event. They saved till the end what I consider one of the most interesting parts of the Apple event, pretty much a redesign of how the iPad works.
My goodness, yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a huge thing. My piece on Six Colors is that Apple got over its hangups a little bit, which is they basically went back and redesigned. They did like split view and slide over, and then they did Stage Manager, and they iterated on that a little bit. This OS, just to be clear, they threw that away. It's gone. They built an entirely new windowing model that you can turn on and off, and so you can use it in single window mode. But if you're in the windowing mode, it just works basically like Mac Windows do. I think when I say that Apple has kind of gotten over its hangups, one of the things is that there was a period where they kept trying to do the iPad as like not quite the Mac, but let's reinvent it and put a spin on it. And I think that I felt a lot of confidence coming from people at Apple that like, you know what? The Mac did this. It's good. Let's just like, why are we not just using something that's familiar? And whatever that hang up was, they definitely got over it. And having played with it this week, like, it's good. It's good because it's familiar and it works. And,
it's a computer, not a consumption device.
And honestly, I felt like for 5 years they were fighting. It's good and it works. And they're like, no, we're going to revisit this and we're going to move your windows around. And I mean, Harry uses an iPad even more than I do. So
yeah, you were iPad complete, right?
I have been primarily iPad since 2011, and I have to say. I have to say I'm not over my hangups. I feel like virtually 100% of the comments I've seen about this new approach have been extremely favorable, although some of them are from people who are not really iPad people, and I kind of feel like if you're not an iPad person, then who cares what you think?
I don't think this is a renaissance for the iPad?
The thing I'm concerned about is that I basically feel like windows that float and overlap in a lot of ways are computing's original sin. The more time I spend having to fool around with windows and drag them and get to one that's below another one, the less I can do what I want to do, which is to create stuff or consume stuff. And I thought Split View was pretty good for letting me do a lot of stuff without wrestling with windows. And I don't think it's entirely clear whether somebody who doesn't want to drag windows around can get anything except for this full screen mode, which does not offer split view. And if they offered split view as an alternative, or potentially offered this new interface, but offered some way where you could kind of ignore it if you wanted to and just work with like two large windows at once, I'd be happy. But it's not entirely clear whether that'll be possible. And I feel like nobody else is rooting for split view to survive except for me. So it might not survive.
I'm surprised that they built split view and then they didn't make it easy to get to. Like split view is essentially you can tile two windows in multi-view.
I keep hitting that button by accident.
Split view.
Yeah, I mean you have to know it's there to use it.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why Stage Manager survives because it's the worst thing ever.
They're planning for bigger screen iPads and multiple screens. I'm thinking about plugging in a second screen to my iPad.
Well, actually, on an iPad, I think Stage Manager is terrible, but on an external screen, it's not bad. So you do need, the bigger the screen, the more it makes sense to have kind of more elaborate windowing options.
And it's optional now, like it is on the Mac. It no longer is a fundamental part of iPad windowing. Stage Manager is just a window manager if you want to use it.
Another choice. It feels like we're relitigating one of the earliest battles in GUIs. Xerox PARC had a tiled window interface, not overlapping windows, but Steve Jobs, when he visited, misunderstood. He thought or maybe it was Andy Hertzfeld. I think it was, saw it and thought he saw overlapping windows. So he wrote overlapping windows into the Lisa into QuickDraw, even though Xerox PARC didn't do it because it's computationally difficult. And maybe aesthetically it's problematic. Harry sounds like he's a tiling windows guy.
And Bill Atkinson, who was a genius who just passed away, I think contributed a lot to the ability of GUIs to have sophisticated windows. And
maybe I should say Bill Atkinson because he wrote QuickDraw, not Andy.
I should mention that part of this reorder, they also added all of those same window tiling features that they added to the Mac last year, where you can with a keyboard shortcut, you can put, side by side or
Microsoft
four in a corner.
Windows Snap.
Exactly. So there's tiling in there, but it's not a tiling system. It's freeform windows with tiling commands that you can assign to them. Yeah.
I mean, basically, if you want an iPad to work like a Mac, this is fantastic. And there is a lot of other stuff they added that I am enthusiastic about, like the Files app is much more sophisticated. Background tasks work better. Yeah. In a lot of ways, I think they did do a good job of finally making the iPad into a more professional tool.
And all of this was to kind of deflect from the fact that they had announced a year ago at WWDC Siri as a chatbot, which they were not able to do. And I thought, though, that Apple handled it much better than I expected. They basically introduced a bunch of AI features kind of gracefully integrated into the overall interface, and then said, developers, you can do this in your apps too, and said, we'll get to the chatbot later. And that was the right thing to do? And
they were also open-minded about calling on ChatGPT when ChatGPT can do something well. So you can do image generation with ChatGPT now.
Gurman says it's spring 2026 for the Siri AI upgrade in his Bloomberg rumor piece. Of course, that's not been announced.
That sounds about right, given it's clear it's not going to be in the fall. If it's not going to be in the fall, it'll be a little while after that.
In the interviews the executives did, they did a whole bunch of them with everybody but John Gruber after the event. They implied that we already have it working inside Apple. We just want to make sure that it's completely reliable before we release it.
Yeah, look, I know some people that have worked on in Siri and are familiar with some of the code base, and they've been saying for a couple years, and they could be wrong. So I want to be honest about this. Like, they could be wrong. I think there are different opinions. I've sort of asked people in my briefings with Apple, so I asked them as respectfully as I could this question, which is that the code base of Siri goes back, all the way to like DARPA.
Apple acquired a company, right? It wasn't even done inside out.
SRI,
yeah.
So that so adapting that code base. My question to them was like, how do you adapt that code base to the LLMs, right? Which is, how do you put that on top of it? And so the people that I know that say they're going to have to start over. The people that had some familiarity with the code base at Apple, they say they're going to have to start over. It's just not something you can build on. You've seen how it struggled the last few years. So that's one school of thought. There's another school of thought. So inside Apple, they're like, well, Mac OS is based on Unix code base, which look at that over time. Like, that's been hardened. It's been tuned. It's, has shown its strength, by having a long code base. It's not necessarily a bad thing. So these two, they're sort of two minds on this, but I think no one, believes that it's really anywhere close to where it needs to be yet. But I think that still, Apple's larger strategy, and I wrote about this. This was what I wrote after WWDC, which is, the headline was, Apple's de-chatbot-ification of AI is nearly complete, which is our thing is not that you're going to sit there chatting with chatbots all day, right? Like, that's not that far away from a command line. Instead, we're going to put these features where people are actually using them and finding the ways that they can make the most sense to take the best things that LLMs can do, like language translation, a great thing, like taking pattern recognition in large bodies of text, summarization. We're going to take those things and we're going to move them straight into the places where people can use them. And I think there is some validity to this approach based on some research that ZDNet and Aberdeen Research did some research this year. And what we found was, we did a survey that we published last month, that we found that 8% of people said they were willing to pay for AI features in their devices.
Oh,
that was
wow.
Far less than we expected.
Yeah.
69% said they would stop using the device if there were AI features they couldn't turn off, right?
Oh my gosh.
There's a huge gap between the story that Google and OpenAI and Microsoft and Anthropic are telling about, these things, and the general public's sort of massive enthusiasm gap there, and maybe understanding gap, right, of these things. And our conclusion was that a lot of it is based on privacy, right? That people are not real trustworthy. They've seen what happened with especially Meta and some and at times Google with privacy, and they're not real sure that they can trust these AI features. And so, Apple, I think, taking some of the features, sometimes they use AI and they don't even call it AI. They just try to make a smarter feature out of it. And my sense, and what I put forward in this piece, is that that's probably the best way to start getting people used to using these features. Just give them better translation in the translation app, right? It's still not as good as Google Translation, but it is better. I think that's a smarter way, and it's going to get people more used to using these features, because when they hear AI, people are pretty skeptical. That survey that we ran was scientific survey of about 2,500 people throughout the U.S. And it was pretty representative of various
So one thing Apple did gloss over is the fact that this was more of a crisis than they let on, because they basically kind of beheaded the whole department. John Gianandrea kind of got sent upstairs. A lot of people left. Internally, it was a much more turmoil than you saw at WWDC.
Yeah. Apple's never going to show that to you. They're never, I mean, that's PR 101, especially it's Apple PR 101, is that you remember they could introduce a disastrous product or product feature, and the next time they fix it, what they will not say is, "We're sorry, this is our apology." They'll say, "Well, this one is even better." And they move on. And
they only did that once, to my knowledge, and that's with the trash can Mac over Jason's right shoulder.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
they did apologize for that one.
They did sort of, but so anyway, it's very much Apple. I would say, like Jason, my fellow Jason, I also wrote a piece about this that I said Apple Intelligence shifts gears. And the idea is, look, I think last year Apple felt so much pressure for the industry and for investors and all that they needed to fly the AI flag, and they kind of lost track of who they are. And this year I felt like, full credit to them, they remembered who they were. First off, everything that they announced is in the betas, which means basically they didn't vaporware anything.
Pre-announcements, yeah.
If there are things that they want to ship in the next year that aren't going to ship this fall, they didn't talk about them. They'll do that later.
Smart.
I think that's super smart. I think that, as Jason said, they integrated a bunch of AI and ML stuff throughout the operating system. They also got off their, I think they're kind of, we need to invent it approach, where they're like, put ChatGPT where it needs to be. Their update to Xcode, they had this thing called Swift Assist that they showed us a year ago and never shipped. And I went into the same room with the same demo people this year, and they said it's already out in developer beta 1. And what they did with Swift Assist, so it's AI coding, right? And there's a huge amount of growth and pressure there. They took what was originally a feature with their model that they were going to work on, and instead Xcode now will work with ChatGPT or literally any other on or off device model you want to plug in with a URL and an API key, and it will be completely integrated with Xcode. And that's a great example of Apple getting over their discomfort with relying on third-party LLMs when they need to. I think we're going to see more of that. I mean, of course, there are table stakes. Apple needs to have good models. They have allowed their app developers now to use their on-device models, which could actually be a boon for third-party app developers. But they also are remembering, we make devices that people like to use, and maybe we should focus on making the platforms for those devices good and not overpromise because we're panicked about AI. And it was just a good, there's still lots of issues with Apple's AI infrastructure and their research and all of that kind of in the long run. There are lots of issues there. Just try to do an image playgrounds and you'll see it. But it feels like they are understanding who they are a little bit more, and I think that's good, because last year I think they actually kind of lost the plot.
I'm a little surprised that Android has not raced further ahead with AI, given Google is Google.
Maybe they saw Jason's survey.
Maybe so. I mean, I agree with that. I also think, besides people being worried about privacy, we've just seen so many AI features that are terrible, and a smaller set of AI features that are really good. And, the industry has to put up with stuff that actually is helpful. And I was a little bit hopeful at WWDC, because that seemed to be what Apple was focusing on, rather to impress anybody that they were AI wizards.
And the empowering of third-party developers at a time when Apple's relationship with third-party developers is kind of at a low. The fact that you basically get access to their on-device models for free, and we know that those are private because they're on device. They opened private cloud compute, which is their private cloud infrastructure. That's open in shortcuts now, so not to third-party app developers, but I think they're sending a signal that in the long run, if you're developing an app for the iPhone or the iPad or the Mac, you are going to get access to Apple's private models. And that's a really good thing. Not only do you get the power of those models in your app for free or for cheap in the case of the cloud model probably, but also it's got the privacy story that goes with it. And I think that that's a way that Apple can kind of say, this is what being an app on our platform brings you. So I think they're making some smart decisions. Sometimes I think we let the fact that they got behind on their LLM technology kind of cloud other places where they have been making good machine learning decisions for a decade. They blew that one. And last year, it seemed like they blew that one and they were freaked out. And this year, it seems like they've got a game plan. They still got to, I would say I'm much more positive about them in general. I do think they're going to need to prove it when it comes to their models. But, otherwise, I think that because they're open to other models, they're going to be okay.
We're going to take a little break because I do want to talk. I mean, we probably won't spend as much time on it, but Google did release Android 16. That'll be a 3-minute conversation. Harry's just written a piece about quantum computing. IBM announced that it's going to have a real quantum computer in just a few years. A lot more to talk about in just a bit with our esteemed panel of tech journalists, Jason Heiner, Harry McCracken, and Jason Snell. Great to have all three of you. This episode of This Week in Tech brought to you by Oracle. In business, they say you can have better, cheaper, or faster, but you only get to pick two. What if you could have all three at the same time? That's exactly what Cohere, Thomson Reuters, and Specialized Bikes have. Since they upgraded to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. OCI is the blazing fast platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs, where you can run any workload in a high availability, consistently high performance environment and spend less than you would with other clouds. How's it faster? OCI's block storage gives you more operations per second. Cheaper? OCI costs up to 50% less for compute, 70% less for storage, and 80% less for networking. Better? And test after test, OCI customers report lower latency and higher bandwidth versus other clouds. This is the cloud built for AI and all your biggest workloads. Right now, with zero commitment, try OCI for free. Head to oracle.com/twit. That's oracle.com/twit. We thank them so much for their support of This Week in Tech. So Google, it's funny, maybe the timing could have been better, launched Android 16. I have it on my Pixel. You'd be hard-pressed to see a whole lot of differences. It's not a giant release, anything like what Apple's planning in the fall. In fact, what Google did and what they have been doing is held back some features for monthly Pixel feature drops. This has been their new thing of late. But there's a new live update notification, which mimics the live activities notifications on iPhone, which, by the way, I really like. I'm glad to see that on Android. There's group notifications, so you can mush them all together. Again, another thing Apple has been doing. More important than anything else, though, I think advanced protection, which adds security for your Android device, initially, again, for the Pixel. Online attacks, harmful apps, unsafe websites, scam calls, and more. You have to go to advanced protection to enable it. Anything else to talk about? There's dark artwork now in the media player. Health Connect lets you. It's funny because people complain about Apple copying Android. Almost all of this is stuff that Apple's been doing that Android's now. But this is good. You want cross-pollination between platforms, right? That's good for users.
I do think it's weird that Google has not done more to kind of make Android clearly kind of the first well-known existing operating system where AI is absolutely at its core and is doing transformative things, because if anybody has the opportunity to do that, it's probably Google. And if they're working on that, they have not really told us about it or shown it. And in fact, it sometimes seems like Android is not one of their top 3 or 4 priorities these days.
Yeah, there was a rumor, I don't think it's true, spread by the creator of one of the third-party ROMs, that Google was about to abandon AOSP, its open source version of Android. I don't know if that's true. I think he was maybe overreacting, but still, Android does not seem as important to Google as it once was. Do you think they're worried that the courts are going to force them to divest?
They're worried about the courts forcing them to divest something. Although that something might be Chrome or something, or their ad business rather than their mobile operating system.
Soon. I thought we were going to know it sooner than now. I thought we were going to know in the end of May, but I guess the judge is still debating that one. Let's talk anyway.
Or Chrome seems more likely. Chrome or the ad business seem more.
Or stop paying Apple $20 billion a year to be the default search engine. On,
if they don't,
iOS.
somebody else will.
Right.
It's a lot of people.
Right. I'm sure Sam Altman's sitting there ready to write a check any minute now. That's Google's biggest threat. I think not government intervention, not Apple, but AI. And you're right, Harry. Gemini is a strong platform, but you would never know it, really. It doesn't get all the press. It doesn't get the attention. Partly, Google fumbled it with their initial releases of Gemini, talking about putting Elmer's glue on your pizza and recommending eating rocks and things like that. That kind of stuff sticks in people's minds. In fact, when you talked about your survey, Jason, I honestly don't think people are worried about privacy. I think they just are creeped out by AI in general.
There are a lot of things it's not very good at. So the hard thing about the chatbot is you do it and you figure out pretty fast. Like I purposefully ask it things that I know sometimes, just to see if it's going to give me the right answer. And it's still far too high a number of times where it gives me wrong answers or inaccurate or just, almost dangerously incorrect.
Well, that's how we judge search engines all these years. You'd put your name in and see what they came up with.
See what happens.
Yeah. Now we do that with AI, and it's just as dumb. Google is buying out. This is actually I think a bigger story than I saw. The information had the exclusive, so maybe that's why. But Google is offering voluntary buyouts to employees across search, knowledge and information. They're offering buyouts. This all started on Tuesday to U.S. employees in Core, which is the engineering team working on Google's underlying technical infrastructure, research, marketing, and communications. I'm not sure how big they are. They laid off 20,000 people at the beginning of the year.
Yeah. I think that I wish we had a chart here, because I think this is more related to anything than the massive overhiring that the tech companies did during COVID and 2020, 21, 22, right? If you look at the number of people they hired, like Meta, for example, it's just now starting to get back to almost about where it was, in those years, pre-2020. And there was so much hiring that they did. They just, hired huge numbers of folks. And they overhired, and now they're having to rationalize some of their costs around that stuff. It was a bit of an arms race, right? Whoever could hire, they were trying to hire the best talent, the fastest that they could. And the thing that's really rough right now is I know some people who've just recently graduated, that have graduated from computer science, computer engineering. They cannot find jobs because they have all these tech companies have let go so many folks. And so now the market's been flooded with a lot of folks. And they, if you've trying to hire in the last 6 months or a year and you just are a new graduate, it's pretty brutal. There's
another reason, and I floated this last week, but you guys might have some handle on this. In the tax code, for a long time, the tax code allowed you to write off R&D expensive, which includes, by the way, engineers and coders, in the same year that you spent it. That will change soon to amortizing those costs over 5 years, which is a huge change in the tax bill for these big companies. This was in the 2017 law. The Congress they wanted to keep it revenue neutral, so they didn't want to mention this change, but it is now going to kind of kick in. And this is an article by Catherine Bobb in Quartz. She says that's probably the reason more than 500,000 tech workers have been laid off in the last 2 years because of Section 174. It's gutting in-house software and product development because they can't write it off in the same year that it's incurred. Anybody got a line on that, or is that
This
was out of the blue when I read this. I went, holy cow.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that.
For 70 years, American companies could deduct 100% of qualified research and development spending in the year they incurred the cost. That's salaries, software, contractor payments, if it contributes to creating or improving a product. That's off the top line right there, fully deductible. That was changed in 2017. And now, it was changed in a way that it wouldn't really kick in until now. But it didn't start affecting people until 2022. So I don't know.
It does make sense. Actually, it's interesting. Like I said, Leo, I wish I had the chart with me, but if you look at the chart at some of these companies, the hiring 2020, 2021, 2022,
right.
And then it's stair stepping downward, right?
And that's why.
Then,
or at least that's one sense. Contention.
That's
the tax code. Yeah. I haven't heard any coverage of this. So I saw this story in Quartz, and it was repeated, of course, in a lot of publications, but it came out of Quartz. I don't know any more about it. I'm not an expert in this kind of stuff. But as a small business owner, I know if you can deduct it in the year you spend it, that's much better than spreading it out over 5 years. That's a big difference. All right, moving on. Let's talk about quantum computing. Harry, you writing not a cover piece, but a big think piece for a Fast Company. I saw this week in the MIT Technology Review. IBM is planning to build the world's first large-scale error-corrected quantum computer by 2028. Now, Harry, I had thought quantum computers were like fusion reactors, this stuff of science fiction.
Yeah, I mean, well, they've definitely been making progress, and the piece I wrote, which will be up on our website shortly, is not so much a think piece as an explainer. Like all of a sudden, my colleagues who work at our headquarters in New York, who are not full-time technology people, had been hearing enough about quantum that they were intrigued in a way they hadn't, which is how this story came to be. And it's trying to get kind of curious people who don't know a lot about this topic up to speed. And I mean, the state where we are now is that progress has been made. It's not just stuck in the labs. IBM has made progress. Google and Amazon and Microsoft have all had major announcements in terms of breakthroughs in the last few months. Smaller companies like D-Wave have also kind of reached an inflection point. And we're not yet at the point where quantum computers are doing the kind of stuff that people envision, which is essentially like coming up with amazing new drugs through forms of computing that you couldn't ever have done before. But they are getting there. We are at a point where I think there have been some examples of quantum computers performing calculations that could not have been done before and might even be useful. They're not yet ones that will change the world, but I think that for a long time, people kind of thought that maybe it might be like fusion and something that people love to talk about as a breakthrough that would always be years away. And the biggest stuff is probably still years away, but I don't think that it's fanciful at this point.
The IBM computer is going to be called Starling. The big breakthrough is in error correction. That's kind of the challenge of this. Qubits are is kind of in superposition. They're a little fuzzy.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, controlling quantum physics is really hard.
Yeah,
and
I'm amazed we can even consider it. To be honest with you,
it's extremely hard to get a qubit to respond in exactly the same way every time, in the way that we're used to bits being very reliable. And the way, generally speaking, you solve that is you take a bunch of unreliable qubits and you pool them together into a logical qubit, which relies on all of them, but you get out the unpredictability by pooling them. And so logical qubits are really interesting. And if you want to look at numbers that relate to these computers, look at how many logical qubits they have rather than how many physical qubits they have.
The MIT Technology Review says that Starling will have 200 logical qubits. That means it could perform 100 million logical operations consecutively with accuracy, although they say some experts say 100 million is a tenth of what you need. You need at least a billion error-corrected logical operations to execute any useful algorithm. She quotes Wolfgang Pfaff, who's a physicist at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. He says it's unlikely this will generate economic value.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big challenges about writing about this stuff is that even the people who know a lot about it kind of disagree wildly about how soon it's coming. And a lot of the people who do know a lot also are working for these companies and are, they're invested in the idea that it is going to happen relatively soon. And if you're working at these companies, you can't say that a useful quantum computer is 30 years away because you probably would not be investing in it. But a lot of the major work on this stuff sort of happened 20, 25 years ago, and it has gotten us somewhere.
IBM says 2028 for Starling, and then shortly after, 2029, it plans to build Blue Jay, which will contain 2,000 logical qubits and will be capable of 1 billion logical operations. So maybe it is closer than we thought. NIST is preparing for that, of course. They have quantum hard encryption technologies available now. So that you can start encrypting your stuff, preparing for a future where these computers will be able to crack strong encryption.
The software is a very large component of this and is kind of making progress in parallel because you don't, once you actually have the quantum computers, you need algorithms that can accomplish useful things. But it's been a little bit of a chicken and the egg. But there are a number of startups that are entirely focused on algorithms and other stuff like IBM has this thing called Qiskit, which is essentially a platform for creating quantum algorithms that works on their computers, but it's open and not solely for IBM quantum computers.
Yeah.
I wonder where quantum intersects with the AI, revolution. Where
Benita was asking that. Does this make smarter AI?
Or cheaper, because one of the biggest challenges is AI is massively unprofitable, right? Like LLMs are massively unprofitable right now because it takes so much computing power to do it. And so I wonder, why, and there's so much hyperbole around generative AI. And yet like even OpenAI is years and years away from profitability, right? As high as their value.
Well, wait a minute. Sam Altman on his blog post this week said that ChatGPT uses 0.34 watt hours for each query, about what an oven would use in a little over a second. And it uses 0.000085 gallons of water, a 50th of a teaspoon per query. Now, do you believe Sam Altman?
Well, here's what I do believe. I do believe that they are massively unprofitable, and they've said it. And they said they're not even close to being profitable. So however much it costs, they're using a metric ton of it to do everything that they're doing.
What he didn't mention is, 0.34 watt hours per query, but we do 1 billion queries a day.
Yeah.
So do the math on that. 1 billion times a 50th of a teaspoon adds up to a significant amount of water, actually.
Generally speaking, I think the conventional wisdom among people who know what they're talking about is that quantum and AI will work together, and there's an opportunity for quantum to do things like train AI models. But quantum's not going to supersede AI, and the future is probably about quantum doing some things such as drug discovery, materials science, and working in concert with AI, which is also tackling some aspects of some of those same challenges.
Well, that's closer than it seems and farther than it looks, or something. What is that quote? One more. Of course, the president and Elon Musk had a little bit of a falling out. Elon's been trying to make up to the president, maybe scared that he'd lose some of the contracts that he has with the federal government, including the SpaceX contracts. I don't know if he's going to, because there isn't much competition for those contracts. Jeff Bezos' rocket company, Blue Origin, has delayed the second launch of the New Glenn from late spring to August 15th. There isn't a lot of competition for what SpaceX does. Boeing, of course, is struggling as well. So that's the latest according to the information from Blue Origin. Let's take a little break, come back. 23andMe has a new owner. just like the old owner. We'll talk about that and more. It's great to have you here, Harry McCracken, the technologizer at Fast Company. Jason Snell from sixcolors.com and editor-in-chief, no dashes at ZDNet, Mr. Jason Heiner. I checked. You're right. You don't use dashes. I thought that was always EIC was always a dash.
I love that you checked the usage.
I didn't believe you.
Sure.
How could that be true? I haven't gotten up to go get the AP style guide, though.
Spoken like a true journalist.
Well, you remember that email was initially e-mail.
Yeah.
And then it became email, capital E, one word. And now it's lowercase e. The language evolves, obviously, and I guess
internet was also capitalized originally.
Yeah, do we not do that anymore? I remember I was shocked by my spell checker on Windows saying it's a capital I. I said, what?
I capitalize it personally because it is just one thing, but that's not our copy standard. It's
not a proper
company. It's lowercase.
Name. What is the rule on that? It has to be a proper name?
Right. Usually.
I think
how the internet is just a technology, right? Or
to me, it's a thing. It's a thing. I mean, it's a very large, sprawling thing, but it's a thing.
I don't know.
The New Yorker I started lowercase CNET, which is why this discussion has been in the news lately.
Yeah, I love that. I love the. See, we're all nerds here. You're all writers. We're all nerds when we talk about this stuff.
Is such a nerdy topic.
It's such a nerdy topic. Great to have all three of you. Thanks for being here. Our show this week brought to you by Melissa. So we just celebrated our 20th anniversary. Melissa just celebrated 40 years as the trusted data quality expert, but they are not resting on their laurels. I'm resting on my laurels, but they are not resting on their laurels because really they see their job not as, cleansing your address records, but really as being your partner in data science. And they have, in fact, acquired some data science companies. They're really focused on transforming your business. And of course, one of the technologies everybody's talking about these days is AI. And AI is absolutely in every industry now, from manufacturing and supply chain management to the healthcare industry. But even the most advanced AI models can't fix the underlying data quality issues in your data. That's where you need Melissa. It's like having a data expert who never sleeps. Melissa's intelligent system verifies identity to prevent fraud in gaming operations, used widely in the gaming industry, also used in the health industry. Melissa is used to ensure valid patient and medicine identification in healthcare systems. That's super important, isn't it? Melissa securely updates and verifies constituent data across government databases. And Melissa's Know Your Business enables verification and monitoring for financial institutions. This is something, of course, that's a compliance issue. Melissa's industry-leading data validation tools are everywhere you want them to be, including now Microsoft Azure through the Azure Data Factory. Organizations of all sizes can migrate using existing SSIS packages to the cloud without disruption while accessing comprehensive data cleansing capabilities. Scale data quality operations faster, reduce infrastructure overhead, and maintain existing enterprise data workflows, all within Azure's elastic, efficient, maintenance-free cloud environment. With real-time data validation, comprehensive enrichment, cross-referencing verification with gold standard reference data, and intelligent anomaly detection, it's no wonder Melissa is the trusted data quality expert worldwide. And of course, your data is always absolutely safe with Melissa. They securely encrypt all transfers. They have an information ecosystem, security ecosystem built on the ISO 27001 framework. They adhere to GDPR policies and SOC 2 compliance, and on and on and on. Contact Melissa's team to learn how they can help you elevate your business and improve your data quality. Get started today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit. That's melissa.com/twit. We're longtime partners with Melissa. I'm very happy to do so. melissa.com/twit. Thanks, Melissa, for supporting This Week in Tech. So for a while, 23andMe. What a story. This was the genetic testing company founded by Ann Wojcicki, who is the sister to Susan Wojcicki, who recently passed, ran YouTube. Her mother, Esther, rented the garage to a couple of guys named Sergey Brin and Larry Page when they were starting a little thing called Google. I mean, really Silicon Valley royalty. But for some reason, and I've never really understood why, 23andMe was really struggling. Maybe people didn't want to do genetic testing. I did it. Everybody in my family did it. The board quit, not happy with Wojcicki's governance. Eventually, they declared bankruptcy, and the bankruptcy court found a buyer, a biotech company called Regeneron, who says we don't want your personal information, but we do want the genotypes and phenotypes, all that data for hundreds of millions of people that 23andMe has collected. That's going to be useful enough for us to make new drugs. That's what Regeneron does. Weirdly, Ann Wojcicki came back and said, outbid Regeneron, and just this week bought 23andMe back. It was a nonprofit controlled by Wojcicki that made a bid that outbid Regeneron. Regeneron had bid $256 million. She bid $303 million. I don't know if this is going to reassure former 23andMe customers, because there's some value in 23andMe that's beyond the business. I have already deleted my data from 23andMe. Apparently, so have 15% of the customers, but that's not close to all. What is going on?
I didn't delete my data from it. I probably should have.
Should you? Do you think you need to?
I was kind of waiting to see what happens.
Yeah, the bankruptcy court hired a privacy ombudsman to make sure that data, wasn't passed on to some company that was going to use it against you.
Yeah.
I haven't deleted mine either.
Yeah.
I deleted mine.
Okay. So it's 50-50. But first of all, here's the question. Why did they fail in the first place? It seems like a good business.
I feel like none of these companies have figured out how to help people once they've done this test.
Now what?
I did it partially.
Okay, you're 5% Ashkenazi Jew and 3% indigenous Indian. And what?
I've done a bunch of these partially because of the genealogical aspect of that.
Yes, and there is a lot of value in that.
You get a long list of people you match, but in a lot of cases, I've tried connecting with those people and they never respond, and it's not even entirely clear, why you should want to do that.
At least one case in my ex-wife's family where a guy who was put up for adoption found his family and they had a reunion, and it was a big deal.
Wow. Yeah. There are a lot of stories like that.
Yeah. I feel like 23andMe's problem was that they thought that the genetic testing was the entire product.
Yeah.
And it seems like you need more, right? You need a community that people are going to be in, or you need other things. Like I think like Ancestry and MyHeritage and sites like that are doing, they're doing family trees online. They're connecting people's family trees. They're doing like deep scanning and search of old archives for newspaper articles and public records about people. The genealogy side of it, and you pay to have access to the larger trees and all that. I was like, okay, well, that's a product. And they also do a DNA screening, right? That's a product that goes with it. And I feel like it's either that or it needs to be almost like a Facebook sort of thing where you've got a community, so it's all attached together. Because with 23andMe, having done that, I don't even know, 10, 12 years ago, like occasionally I got somebody who said, I think we're a third cousin or whatever, which isn't that exciting. But mostly if you find a near relative and you like ping them, they're not even there because they ran their DNA, they looked, and then they went away.
And they haven't gone back.
It's not an ongoing family. There's no ongoing product to pay for. Whereas if you're at something like one of these family tree sites, at least there's an ongoing product that's attached to it that is related. And I feel like those are the right businesses for this model.
I give Ancestry money every month, but the only money I ever gave 23andMe was when I did the tests. And I also belong to Family Tree DNA, which actually is a McCracken group. So that they've done a good job of the community side. And I can talk to other McCrackens.
Oh, you found other McCrackens?
And very, 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 very distant relatives, but that's still cool.
I found a few. I never talked to them, but I knew that they must be relatives because they shared a family name. 23andMe had about 14 million customers, so it wasn't they had a good customer base. The company, according to the Wall Street Journal, never made a profit. They burned cash across its DNA testing, drug development. That was by the way, and that's why Regeneron wanted it, is that there is, in aggregate, some use to this data. Drug companies would love it, right?
For sure.
And they also had a telemedicine business. I didn't even know about that. They don't have a lot of debt, which is interesting. They just didn't make any money. They were valued at $6 billion briefly after they went public in 2021.
Yeah, they just weren't sure what they wanted to be. Did they want to build a consumer business? Well,
right.
Like everybody said, if so, they needed to create a community. They needed to go more the family tree, genealogy route. Or did they want to be more of a drug company or a research company, more like CRISPR Therapeutics or Fulgent Genetics or some of these other ones, Intellia, Beam Therapeutics, those companies. And I'm sort of surprised that one of them didn't buy it for the data. That's sort of what I expected it to go in that direction. But there's also, from my understanding, one of the things that probably hurt them was the regulatory environment over the past 4 years made it very difficult, almost impossible for any of those companies that I mentioned, genomics companies, anybody in healthcare, to make any acquisitions, that it was really difficult. And as a result, those companies have sort of, complained that they haven't been able to go to the market to get valued as what their true value is because the regulatory environment is so bad. They really have no hopes of getting any kind of acquisition if they were acquired, right? To be approved because of the regulatory environment in the previous administration, and I guess there's I don't know, the regulatory environment now is sort of tough to read. I mean, we talked about Google earlier. It appears like Google is going to continue to, the breakup of Google could, be continuing even under the current administration. So it's a little uncertain, but I suspect, and this is only an opinion, I suspect that that Anne Wojcicki, believes that the environment's likely to get better. And so that if she can pull off what she tried to do, she tried to take the company private when she was there, and
that's when the board
rejected
quit.
her.
Yeah,
the board rejected it. And so I suspect if she's willing to put this much money forward now, that she anticipates that the regulatory environment's going to be better. They could go to the market and get a valuation, and that some of these other companies actually could be in the market and make an acquisition. Again, that's pure speculation, but that seems to be why she would be willing to potentially put up a lot of her own funds and her own reputation behind
it. Feels like, given that all four of us have done it, and I bet a lot of our audience has done it, that it was like the pet rock of its time, like 10 years ago. Like everybody, let's all do our genetic testing. Like, I think we hoped we would learn something from this. Like, you're going to have a higher incidence of heart disease or something. It turned out to really just be kind of faddish.
It was about like ancestry. Like you get your family stories of like, oh well, you're really Irish or you're really
a lot
Scottish
of people wanted
or whatever.
To know what they're,
And so and they did a pretty good job. I mean, it's not perfect, and there are people who are skeptical that they act more certain about your background than you actually are. But still,
it's a statistical.
It's better than it's better than a story handed down, or the fact that everybody's family names come from their father's side, and so you might recognize a McCracken, Harry, right? But you've got 7 other family names out of 8 that you might not even know or pay attention to. And like, so the genetics, it's like, aha, we've got science, we're going to find this out. And that's interesting. But I will say, for years, I've been telling people that my family name is Dutch because snel means fast in Dutch. And it was not 23andMe that told me the truth. It was My Heritage or Ancestry, where I found a detail that took it all the way back to Heinrich Schnell, who was from Germany, and when he came to South,
Schnell also means fast in German, by the way.
Fast in German, but it was, and I could pinpoint literally the man who emigrated to America.
Well, that's cool.
and went by Henry Snell once he came to South Carolina in 1720 or whatever. But that was the family trees that did it.
That's cool.
Not the genetics. So that's why I think, I mean, it is cool to know that I am just as British Isles as I look, but it didn't blow. Like, I know somebody who's a friend of mine who was adopted, who put his DNA results in, and it came back and said, "This guy's your father."
Whoa!
Right,
as it would if your father had to do it too. And then, in fact, there was a good story in the I think it was the New Yorker, the Sunday New York Times, a couple of weeks ago, about Chinese families who are discovering the real truth about, or American families are discovering the real truth about the Chinese babies that they adopted. They were told stories that weren't in fact true, and that was because there are volunteers who are getting people in China who don't have the money to do genetic testing like 23andMe to do it, so that they could then try to find relatives. And it's been really interesting. I did a couple of years ago, I was interviewed by Frank Church, who's the father of modern genomics. And he has a company called Nebula Genomics that for 10 times more will do your full genome. I mean, literally it's gigabytes of data. I did it, but it's the same problem. Now what? Okay, great. I have my genome, my full genome, which is not what you get from 23andMe. There are companies you can send it to, and they will tell you, oh, you shouldn't eat sugar or something, but it's not hugely valuable. I think that's why I think of it as a fad.
You have 8%
the same day that
DNA.
The same day that they announced Ann Wojcicki was going to be able to buy 23andMe, 27 states and the District of Columbia sued, saying customers did not expect their DNA data would be sold. I guess that's probably true. And the states are opposed to the sale of it without direct consent. Each and every one of us has to say it's okay before their data is sold.
Although
the most valuable part of the company.
I mean, that idea has been looming over this entire industry for as long as this industry has existed. So it's not a complete shock that push would come to shove and with at least one of these companies eventually.
Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield says people did not submit their personal data to 23andMe, their spit, thinking their genetic blueprint would later be sold off to the highest bidder. I guess that's true. But what did we think?
What did we think was going to happen? I don't know.
What did we think was going to happen?
Yeah. We're probably a little more cynical than the average, American, but I think, I don't, and also know a lot about the tech industry and how things are monetized, and that when things start, they do a lot of things, and when they have to actually make a profit, they do a lot of different things.
Right. There's something in there because she's willing to pay hundreds of millions of dollars. It's a nonprofit she's running called TTAM Research Institute. There is some value in it, obviously.
To have that much data, right, on that many people is incredibly valuable. Like the whole value of what's left in the thing, is very likely, the data from the people, right?
Right.
And so I think that it's just a long game. They weren't quite sure who they were and what they wanted to do with all that data. But long term, there is likely a treasure trove of information that's medically valuable, that is valuable in lots of different ways, that you could build businesses on, that you could make potentially medical breakthroughs on. That's why I expected it more to be one of the genomics companies to be more likely to buy these things, to have all of that, all of that data. Now it's not as valuable as, like you said, Leo, the whole genome, because it's only, mapping part of it, but it is interesting.
It is not even just the genotype, because remember, you answered a bunch of questions. You filled out a bunch of questionnaires.
Yeah.
That's your so-called phenotype. And it's the connection between the genotype and the phenotype that's of value. Does your family have a history of heart disease? Okay, well, we have your genotype to match up to that. That's what's real value. Apparently, what hasn't been settled in law, and this lawsuit is expected perhaps to help settle, is Well, do you have the rights to your genetic data? I mean, if you give it to a company,
right? Who owns the copyright on your genetic code?
Yeah. The lawsuit could be significant in helping to establish, this is from the New York Times, not just whether a customer needs to give consent to sell the information, but who actually owns that data.
Is it your intellectual property in some way?
Very interesting. And there is a public interest, of course, in getting that anonymized data out there because it could develop new drugs, new treatments. It could be very valuable in a variety of ways.
This could certainly intersect with tech more and more too, with the wearables and also biometrics and things. Right, we're starting to give more and more of who we are to the tech companies, and that's only likely to increase as more sensors get put in devices, and that's not quite as sensitive as the information in 23andMe, but it's getting there.
Right. All right, let's take a little break. You're watching This Week in Tech. Jason Heiner. I always want to say nice things about you, Jason. Maybe it's, I don't know. You got me elected to be president of the internet back when it had a capital I. So thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Always good to see you, my friend. Actually, all three of you. I have great affection for you too. Harry McCracken, known you for years. Your wife, Marie, is sitting in the other room with her cats. Give her my best. Nice to see you once again. And of course, Jason Snell, who I get to see every week because he also, among his many other efforts, he's on about 100 podcasts. He's on
we have MacBreak Weekly.
Yes.
Every Tuesday.
And Six Color Stock.
My wife is also in the other room with cats.
Well, there you go. Actually, so's mine. So there you go. You got any cats, Jason?
Our cats recently have passed on in the last year. Or otherwise, my wife would be in the other room.
She's dreaming of cats. She may have gotten one even now while you were doing the show. She might have just run. That's what Lisa did. She said, no, after we put our cat down a couple of weeks ago, which was very sad. Both of us were in tears. She said, no more cats for a while. I gotta get over this. Next day, we got a cat. It was like, it was fast. And we were just as much in love with this one as we were with the others. She's turned me into a cat person. I used to be a dog guy. I don't know what happened. This Week in Tech is brought to you this week by Drata. If you're leading risk and compliance at your company, you're likely wearing 10 hats at once. I mean, you have my deepest sympathy. You're managing security risks. You've got compliance demands and, of course, budget constraints, all while trying not to be seen as the roadblock that slows the business down. But GRC isn't just about checking boxes. It can be a revenue driver that builds trust, that accelerates deals, that strengthens security. That's why modern GRC leaders turn to Drata, a trust management platform that actually makes your life better. It automates tedious tasks so you can focus on reducing risk, on proving compliance, and of course, they're going to help you with that too, and scaling your program. With Drata, you can automate security questionnaires, evidence collection, and compliance tracking. So it takes a big load off of your plate. You'll stay audit ready with real-time monitoring. You'll simplify security reviews with Drata's Trust Center and AI-powered questionnaire assistance. Instead of spending hours proving trust, you build it faster with Drata. Ready to modernize your GRC program? Visit drata.com/weekintech to learn more. Again, that's Drata, drata.com/weekintech. Know this, just weekintech. We'll make it a little shorter for you. Drata.com/weekintech. To find out more. We thank Drata so much for supporting This Week in Tech. Club Twit Discord is posting pictures of their doggies and their kitties. If you don't know yet about the Club Twit Discord, please consider joining our clubs. $10 a month, you get some great benefits, ad-free versions of all the shows, pictures of dogs and cats in the Club Twit Discord. You also get a great conversation. We're doing now all the keynotes. The Developer Week keynotes were all in the club only to avoid takedowns from a certain fruit company. But that worked out really well because we got your input as well. I invite you to join the club. Help us out. It's about 25% of our operating revenue now comes from your membership. That's a big, important part of what keeps Twit alive. Join the cool kids. Look how fast Pretty Fly for a Cis Guy is on the AI image generation.
Amazing.
How many cats is too many, asks Leo Laporte. Club Twit. Join the cool kids club. twit.tv/club twit. Can't wait to have you in the club. We've got some big events coming up. Actually, we just did Chris Marquardt's photo thing. Micah's Crafting Corner is this week. It's a chill place to sit down and do some coding. Home Theater Geeks is going to do a chat room Q&A special on June 25th. You want to be there for that. And my old friend, we were talking about it before the show, the guy I was at the ballpark with during the 1989 earthquake, Norman Maslov, Mazzy, to his YouTube fans, will be talking about vinyl with us. And I'm trying to book a second piece after that about the rise of the MP3 so we can really cover the history of music in the 20th century. But that'll be the 27th with Mazzy's Music, our AI users group. Normally on the first Friday of the month, but that's the 4th of July, so we're going to put it off to the second Friday this week. Anyway, lots of stuff that happens in the club. So please.
Leo, you did the one, the WWDC chat or sort of live stream in the community.
So over the years, Apple's gotten more and more prickly about it. What we've always done for almost 20 years is stream the keynote and then, Mystery Science Theater 3000 styles, comment on it, which in my opinion should be fair use. It's journalistic commentary on a news event. Apple doesn't feel that way. And so, and it wasn't Content ID. It wasn't the automated takedown. They had a lawyer write us a letter in YouTube, and then they went after us on Twitch. And while Microsoft and Google haven't done that, I just thought, you know what? It's not worth. I think it's defensible, but I don't want to defend it in court. It's just not worth the trouble. So we just moved it into the club, and there's a lot of members in our club, and I think they enjoyed it. So that's just how we're going to do it.
It's absolutely fair use for you to comment on it while you're showing it. But, the problem is we live in a world where fair use is after the fact, and all the content scanning on every video platform will just kill things.
And we can't afford to lose our YouTube or Twitch channel. Exactly. I just don't want to take the chance of that.
But, it's interesting, necessity being the mother of invention. Like it's really great. I think that you're doing it that way too.
It's a community,
in the ways, and even you looking at the current environment and thinking ahead, right? Like of the way that the environment is going, both with AI and the way that the YouTube algorithm is, and all of these things. But you doing what you're doing is so smart, of like going even deeper with your most loyal members, right? Even the people you have direct connections with, versus relying on any other platforms to bring you your visitors, right? It's the same thing, Jason Snell too, in the way that he runs, all the things that he does. Going more deeply invested in the people who care the most about the things that you do and the things you say is really, really smart. And I think the media whole industry is in the midst of a major transformation, and probably even more so over the next 12 to 24, 36 months. And I think that like the things that you all are doing is really the way that more and more media is likely to go.
Yeah, I just saw an article that said that while digital advertising spend is going down in general, it's doing nothing but going up in the influencer market. The YouTube stars and so forth. I guess not a surprise, but let me find that. But this is the Atlanta Voice talking about the influencer marketing industry. Ad revenue set to grow 12% in 2025 to $22 billion with dollars. It's kind of an amazing story. I guess we all are creators, right? But Jason and I decided to go it. I don't know about Jason. I didn't have much of a choice, but decided to go it independently. And I think I certainly don't regret it. I know you don't, Jason.
Yeah, I don't. Harry did. Harry had a great site on his own too.
But
right.
For a while.
That's true.
He zipped on back in.
Back in the golden days of blogs.
I'm the only one chicken enough not to have done it in this group.
You've held on to a job for a long time.
Yeah, that's all. That's all. You kept your job. Good job.
It's pretty good. Pretty good.
I don't know.
Pretty
you know,
solid.
if I still had a TV career, would still be doing that. But I do really much prefer working for myself. It's, I like having the control over what
we're fortunate to live in an era where broadcasting can be to a smaller audience and still be successful.
Yeah.
And that the tools, like even in the last 15 years, the tools that the internet provides for people to do what we do.
It's amazing.
It is amazing. There are so many different little companies that have this tool that will let you do this aspect of it. And I mean, for me,
hardware and software.
A lot of my stuff is cobbled together from, it's not like I know like Substack wants to just like everybody just do Substack, but like you can also build from, pick and choose, you use Stripe and you use WordPress and you use Memberful and you use all of these different sources and you can like put them together to make the product that you want and then reach an audience of, it can even just be a few thousand, and suddenly you've got your job.
Even Apple kind of acknowledged that at WWDC. They added tools. They even said for podcasters on the iPad. Right?
They did. Yeah. They gave all of us iPad podcasters a solid, which is you can record. So many of these podcasts, not Twit actually, but many podcasts are edited after the fact. And what you do is you're doing it live over the internet, but that quality is a little reduced. And so everybody records locally. And then you send your file to somebody and they put them together and they make it, it's like you're all in the same room. It's full quality. And the iPad just couldn't do it. You could do it in the cloud, but you couldn't also, while you were using Zoom, for example, also record your voice locally on the device. And they just tossed it in there. And that's the feature, a lot of us have been asking for years and years, because I used to travel exclusively with my iPad, kind of like Harry. I still prefer to do it that way if I can. And then I either needed to bring a laptop just to do podcasts, or I needed to rig up a thing where there was like a recorder that was recording on a memory card that then looped into the iPad. And now, I tried it out. Actually, Dan Morin and I did our 6 Colors podcast last Friday. I bet you we were the first podcast to be entirely recorded on iPads using iPadOS 26, because both of us did that on our iPads using a Shure MV7 microphone, and it worked. It worked.
That's amazing.
So that's a big one. Big win.
So unnaturally excited when they announced that in the I was like, I never expected, or at least like I thought it was gonna be another 10 years or something before they did that.
I know.
I was like, what?
That and the 2 years ago they did Final Cut. I mean, Harry mentioned this in passing, but 2 years ago they introduced Final Cut for the iPad and Logic for the iPad. And the untold story there is you could do Final Cut for the iPad and then export your 4K project. But and then you sat there and stared at the screen. But like, if you wanted to go check your mail, like you could on your Mac, you can't, because it goes, I can't export video in the background. And they added this function, which will be great for rendering and video exports and audio exports and file copies, big file copies, where it just sticks it all in the dynamic island instead and lets you actually, because I would use, Harry, that's how I would always use SlideOver, is I'd start an audio export and then I'd like open my email in SlideOver so that I didn't close the export. So yeah, some big wins for like niche audiences. But you know what? Closing a bunch of gaps for niche audiences is one of the things that helps build loyalty to a product.
I think it should be good just for stuff like Dropbox too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I feel like it's more than that. I feel like it really is. Look, we know Warner Discovery just spun off the profit-making part of the business, the movie studio, HBO, and then took all of the streamers and said, you go over there and be your own business, because we don't want you dragging down our results for the next 5 years. It's everybody knows that that's what's happening. Look at this. YouTube said its ecosystem last year created 490,000 jobs and added $55 billion to the U.S. GDP. Now, that is YouTube's own reporting, but even if it's only half that, it comes from a research study by Oxford Economics. It's remarkable.
Yeah.
So this is a YouTube report exploring YouTube's U.S. impact in 2024. It's pretty clear this is the up and coming television for the new Generation Alpha. It's YouTube.
We used to complain all the time that the new iPads, especially the iPad Pros, were incredible in terms of computational muscle, but the software was way behind, and Apple wasn't really taking advantage of it. And well, I do have some reservations about some of the stuff with iPad OS 26. You can't argue that the software hasn't taken a large stride towards being something capable of soaking up all of this computational power.
Yeah, prior to 2023, they've done these two moonshots the last WWDCs, right? Like Vision Pro and then Apple Intelligence. They were just like such huge moonshots. But prior to those 2 years, if they made this iPad OS announcement back then, this would have been all anybody was talking about. It would have been the hugest story. It would have been the biggest thing. It's just that our perspective is a little different, and there's still also a little bit of hangover from those things in terms of, we're still talking about Vision OS and we're still talking about Apple Intelligence, and we're throughout this. But what happened with the iPad was so big, and I think potentially the both sort of short and medium term impact of it is pretty huge. I was going to ask earlier, Harry, when we were talking about it, if you use the 13-inch or the 11-inch iPad because you use it so much.
I currently use the 13-inch. I had the 11 for the round of iPads before that. Essentially, 11 inches more portable, and 13 inches definitely better for drawing and probably better for productivity, although I have to say that I'm a little disappointed by the battery life on my 13-inch compared to the 11-inch I had, which I still use as an e-reader. Also, the thing that's changed completely since the iPad was new was when the iPad came out, 10 hours of battery life was amazing compared to a MacBook. And MacBooks have raced way past 10 hours. And so now 10 hours is a little disappointing. And I would love it if the iPad Pro, in order to keep a clear difference with the iPad Air, maybe got ever so slightly thicker and got battery life that was more MacBook-like, because that's the game has changed.
Well, stand back, because according to Gurman, next year, 2026, Apple's going to release a redesigned MacBook that'll have the same screen as your beautiful 13-inch iPad, a beautiful OLED screen, and probably what will be M6 by then?
M5.
I guess M5. Okay,
the ultimate computer.
Yeah. Stand back.
I
use the 11-inch iPad, and so it's really interesting, and I love the 11-inch iPad. Like,
I was mostly really happy with it, except for drawing. I like a larger screen for the pencil.
The big one is basically a laptop, isn't it? It's same price.
It is. It's about the same weight as a MacBook Air. I use the bigger one mostly because I'm a keyboard snob, and the keyboard feels a little cramped to me on the 11.
Yeah.
But I every time my wife's got an 11, every time I pick it up, I'm like, oh, it's so light though. It's so nice. But I mean, that's a good problem to have.
It is. I use the 11. I can't draw, so that helps. I don't have that holding me back. But the keyboard is a little bit cramped. But I also, when Apple made the 11-inch MacBook Air, that was my favorite. That was like my favorite Mac ever, and I was sad when that thing was went out of circulation.
Was that the MacBook Nothing? That was the Nothing.
No, it's the 11-inch Air. There used to be 11 and 13-inch Airs. There was a 12.
Yeah.
Then they did the 12-inch Nothing, but they did the 11 and 13 before it was Retina, and they only made a 13. There was an 11, and that was the best laptop. Absolutely.
Yeah, that thing was incredible. And I can only imagine like that size now, even with like Mac Silicon, Apple Silicon. But the 11-inch, the interesting thing about the new OS 26, iPad OS 26, is most of the time I want to do kind of what you expressed earlier, Harry. Like I want to focus on one thing, right? I want to focus on doing something, and be able to use the iPad as a way to do that. But every once in a while, there's like something I need to do where I need like a couple windows. I need to like have two things open to copy and paste, or I need to reference something. And I never, on the 11, it's really hard to do the tiling. They're so small and so challenging that the new one, I almost feel like, the handcuffs have come off. Like, okay, I can have 3 things open at the time. I can just be able to click back and forth on those moments that I need it. It's probably only 10 or 20% of the time, maybe. But that's where I think the power of this iPadOS 26 potentially could really make the iPad, give the iPad a bit of a renaissance. Even for older ones, because we know that even going back to the last several generations of Apple Silicon, they're going to run really well. And imagine having even those. I have an M1 11-inch that still runs amazing and is running iPadOS 26 really well. And I was thinking about that and thinking like it's almost like giving new life to some things that have been around for a while that now are even more powerful.
I also thought it was interesting that they're bringing the new windowing interface to all the iPads, down even to the mini, rather than kind of building it primarily for the iPad Pro type of people who are doing really heavy duty stuff.
I can't imagine many people will use it on the mini though, will they?
No, but you never know. It does speak to the fact that they wrote a new windowing system like that the Stage Manager system. They had to limit it to like the M series, and then they brought some of it back to like the very last before they went to the M series. And this version, the tech has moved along enough. There's enough RAM in those devices now. And then that they built this thing for all iPads to have. And it's not walled off at all. I think that speaks to the fact that they really stripped it back to nothing and started again and built something completely new, which, a lot of new features are just new additions to old features. And this one, it is not like that. This one, they literally threw the old one away. And I know there are issues with that Harry has, but I think in terms of the performance, that's one of the reasons why it performs as well as it does and it's as compatible as it is, because they built it for all iPads and it works on all iPads. I think that's pretty sweet.
It surprised me so much. If you like the iPad, you've sort of been used to disappointment for years, and so maybe it's like our expectations are so lowered, but I was just like so surprised at everything that came to the iPad this year. And to Jason's point, the fact that they really have put it across everything does speak to this becoming such a core feature, core functionality of the OS now, which is fantastic. Certainly likely to be much more performant, because of that. And there was these reports beforehand that this was only going to happen like if you docked an iPad Pro in an Apple, keyboard. It's not that at all, right? There's none of that. Like it's
just a mode
OS. Yeah.
When the iPad first came out, it was just seen as a big iPhone, frankly. And a lot of companies like Meta said, well, we're not going to develop for it. It's a big iPhone. Meta finally has put out WhatsApp for the iPad. Do you think companies like Meta will we ever see an Instagram for the iPad? Are they going to start treating it like a real computer?
Apparently that's in the works now.
Yeah, they announced
finally.
When did they announce that?
Well, I saw news and rumor of that at least in the last week or two.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like the code is there and they're going to release it at some point here soon. So yeah, hell froze over. Again.
That's the other difference. Now, the big difference, and I mentioned this on MacBreak Weekly on Tuesday, the big difference is you can only install apps from an app store on the iPad. It's not a real computer in the sense that you can sideload stuff.
Yeah, and that is both a pro and a con, right? Because for some of us who would love to have, a wide open kind of platform, the Mac will do it, but the iPad won't. On the other hand, the other argument is this is a platform that you might be more comfortable on because you know that everything is passed through the App Store. It really is sort of like what you want out of it. Apple offers both kinds of devices, unfortunately, philosophically, Apple has just decided to draw the line on the shape or functions of the hardware. So like you can't run macOS on an iPad and you can't run iPadOS on a laptop. Instead, you need to pick. And on one side, you get these features, and on the other side, you get these other features. And that's just, at least for now, that's where we are. You can't use an Apple Pencil on a Mac either.
One minor but cool thing, which I don't think was mentioned during the keynote, is that if you add a web app on an iPad to the desktop, so you can open it again from an icon, it will perform like a web app. Whereas in the past, that web app had to have some code in its manifest saying, treat this like an app and run it at full screen if it's on an iPad, and they don't need to do that anymore. So I think if you're not happy with the App Store versions of apps, which in some cases I'm not, I'd rather run the web app. A lot more of them should run really well on an iPad than in the past.
This isn't PWAs, though. This is being a PWA without the support of a PWA, basically.
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure if it's technically PWA, but
it can get you a long way. Yeah, Federico Viticci wrote about this on Mac Stories recently, how he was actually starting to use more saved website apps on his iPad.
I do a lot of that.
Because some of them are really good. I mean, this is the thing, is like native apps are great. Some companies do not invest at all or very much in the native apps, and they generally can invest. Some of them invest a lot in their web apps, and some of those web apps can be really, really good on an iPad.
Like Airtable, which we use at Fast Company. The iPad version is not so great, and it doesn't do everything that the full version does, but the web version is fine, and so I use that on my iPad, and that already works like an app, but a lot more apps should look like apps if you save them to the desktop as an icon now.
Yeah, that's how I use WhatsApp on iPad, and some of the volunteering work I do. I have a lot of WhatsApp groups, and so I love using the.
It's nice to have that
great.
real estate. Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah,
it's much better than doing it on your phone. For goodness sake. Yeah.
Well, just as a testament to how much interest there is in this, we did the whole Apple segment at the beginning of the show, but somehow we got back to it.
This is the overage segment about Apple. So I wanted to mention one other thing, because since we're on this topic again,
might as well.
One of the things that everybody did last year was
so.
Apple Intelligence, right? And what were they going to do this year? And I found it hilarious that when I came out of the event, the two things I was most excited by were the Mac and the iPad. And so when I say Apple was kind of like sticking to its knitting a little bit, I was like, it's kind of comforting that you walked out of an Apple event and the things that you thought about were the Mac and the iPad, not about Apple Intelligence or a Vision Pro or something like that. But like, it's like real meat and potatoes, the Mac and the iPad. So to give the Mac its due, the new Spotlight, which is only on the Mac right now, that has support for like all of these kind of power user features. They added keyboard or clipboard history to Mac OS for the first time. It's like the big missing piece of productivity built into the system, and it's there inside Spotlight. They've got the quick keys thing, which is, like Launch Bar, I think pioneered this, the idea that you can launch something with a couple of keystrokes and it will learn and figure it out. They built all of their app intents frameworks into Spotlight, so you can do things like send an email from Spotlight because it knows how to talk to the Mail app, and it knows what blanks you need to fill in order to get it to send off that action. It's like building a shortcut from the command line for a one-off, and like that plus, and then Shortcuts on top of that has access to all of their ML models, all the way from on device through private cloud out to ChatGPT. Like, as a Mac user, I'm like, oh man, I can't wait to get my hands on this stuff. And like, I can't remember the last time that I came out of an Apple developer event really thinking the Mac was one of the big winners. Usually the Mac just kind of comes along from the ride these days, but like, it was a good iPad show. It was also a really good Mac event. So I'm hyped for Spotlight, which I cannot believe I've never said that before. I'm excited for Spotlight. What is going on?
I'm actually considering taking Raycast off. Because a lot of course, Raycast has more features, but a lot of the features of Raycast I don't use.
Yeah, I've been using Launch Bar for like 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And I think with the clipboard
history,
around? It is. And they still update it. But I use it, I use it as a launcher and for clipboard history. And I look at, and I don't use more advanced clipboard managers that are out there. I don't use those features at all. I just want a list that I can pick from of previous clipboards. And so, yeah, I might be able to just dump it too, Leo, and just say.
Doesn't it feel like you want to use whatever Apple has decided to do natively rather than add a third party tool?
Yes. It also gives me encouragement, like you're talking about the iPad and how Harry especially uses it so much. Once they put clipboard history and quick launching and stuff like that into Spotlight on the Mac, my immediate thought is it's only a matter of time before they bring it to the iPad too. And that'll be great. That would be amazing. So
I thought it was a good WWDC for Vision OS too, by the way.
I agree.
Despite the fact that they've acknowledged this is not a mainstream product. I don't think it's a back burner product. And they actually are putting a lot of work into improving this operating system, and the new personas are pretty amazing.
They're so good.
It's a much, much more realistic digital version of you that's created almost instantly. And the widgets are cool, and it supports GoPro Pro and Insta360, 360-degree videos now.
We debate Vision Pro a lot on MacBreak Weekly, but I'll just say here that I think what we can all agree is it's not a product for the present. If it's anything, it's a product for the future. It's a bet Apple's making on being able to create AR glasses and other products down the road. And if it is a product for the future, what you want to see is that they are iterating, right? You don't want to see it dead in the water. And I am impressed that now, a couple of years in, they do keep adding features. They do keep making improvements. They're like the geographic persistence thing is like, they had to have that. If they're going to do this, they got to have these features. So they're like, it would be a real red flag if they're like, yeah, Vision OS, who cares? But instead they're pushing it forward. And I think we could all, as somebody with a Vision Pro, like, it's great to see those features, but really what they're doing is just kind of loading up on the features so that when they finally, if they finally make products that are more affordable and more wearable and all of those things that are a problem, their OS base looks pretty good. Like, the software is not the problem with that product line. It's the fact that they have a heavy thing that costs $3,500. That's the problem. So push the software forward. I agree. And the personas thing, which was my least favorite thing when they announced the product.
So much better.
There was the dead eyes, the creepy, and the new personas. Like, they made spatial personas, which were better, and then these new personas are even better. They're like, it's amazing how good they are. So I love that they're making advancements. I agree completely here.
It's not like TV OS, which is still a hobby all these years later, and something they aren't really paying attention to. They seem fully engaged by Vision OS. And I think even if I never buy a $3,500 headset, I'm still happy to see them do that.
You don't have a Vision Pro.
I do not own one, no.
Yeah. Jason, do you have a Vision Pro?
I do have a Vision Pro.
Okay,
I'm a Vision Pro user.
50-50,
this is one of the things I was really looking for. I was to see how much do they talk about it, because I was worried, about it becoming tvOS or Home OS, right? But it wasn't like they definitely invested in fixing and incrementing things that like needed to get better, right? And so that's a clear indication. I thought that they are still investing in it. They still see this as the future. They took it on the chin. There were some things they didn't do great, I think the biggest problem with Vision Pro, it was not the product. I think there were two things that were wrong. Like, one, the stupid thing on the to make your eyes on the front was silly. They didn't need that. It would have been a lot less expensive if they didn't do it. And then two, they just marketed it so badly. Like, they really, it should have been, and it was a developer kit. And I think they don't make developer kits, so they weren't going to market it. They had to make something that was still a consumer product. But I feel like they over marketed it a little bit. And then we saw that a little bit again with Apple Intelligence last year. They over marketed Apple Intelligence a bit. And it's kind of not like them. I think in both cases, it felt very, very kind of unlike them to do that. And I do feel like this year that they have sort of gotten a little bit back, as Jason Snell said, back to their knitting of like they may have gotten burned a little bit by some of the way they've messaged things. I still think that there is a great product and a great roadmap in Vision Pro. And so I was excited to see them, do what they did.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed our Apple Reflux.
Yeah.
It just keeps coming back.
No, I thought that was a brilliant hosting move by you, Leo, where you're like, we can't start the show with two full segments about Apple. So we'll just do one, and then we'll move on, and then there's overflow. Stuff it in at the end. Yeah. Put it back in the basement.
I tried to do a YouTube segment, but nobody wanted to. So
sorry.
That's fine. We will have more and who knows what the topic will be with Jason Heiner, Harry McCracken, and of course, Jason Snell. You're watching This Week in Tech. Our episode this week brought to you by my favorite VPN. You probably even know I'm going to say ExpressVPN, right? If you've ever browsed in incognito mode, you probably know. I hope you know. It's not as incognito as you think. Google recently settled a $5 billion lawsuit after being accused of secretly tracking users in incognito mode. Google's response? Well, incognito doesn't mean invisible. Well, in fact, all your online activity is still 100% visible to third parties, even in incognito mode, unless you use ExpressVPN. It's the only VPN I use and trust, and you better believe when I go online, especially when I'm traveling, I'm in an airport, a coffee shop in other countries, ExpressVPN is my go-to. I think everybody needs ExpressVPN. Why? Well, without ExpressVPN, third parties can still see what you're doing, what websites you're visiting, even in incognito mode. Your ISP, your mobile network provider, the admin of that sketch Wi-Fi network at the airport, they all know what you're doing. And a bad guy sitting at the airport can use that to go after you, to literally attack you with a cheap device like the Wi-Fi Pineapple. Now, this is why I think ExpressVPN is the best VPN. It hides your IP address, reroutes all your traffic, 100% of your traffic through their secure encrypted servers. Couldn't be easier to use. You just fire up the app on anything that you've got. I mean, it literally is everywhere. iPhone, iOS, Android, iPad, Mac, Windows, Linux. It's even on my router. Just fire up the app. You click one button to get protected. It works on all devices, phones, laptops, tablets, so you can stay private no matter where you are, on the go and even at home. It's rated #1 by top tech reviewers like CNET and The Verge. Look, protect your online privacy today by visiting expressvpn.com/twit. That's expressvpn.com/twit. And you can get an extra 4 months free when you buy a 2-year package. expressvpn.com/twit. We thank them so much for their many years of support. I was at the airport flying down to Tucson, and of course you get that free airport Wi-Fi, free SFO airport Wi-Fi. And I thought, I'm not going to join that. And then I remembered, oh yeah, fired up ExpressVPN and I was able to use it. That's awesome. expressvpn.com/twit. Anybody tried the new O3 Pro? Any interest in chat? No, zero, nothing.
Haven't dug into it yet, but I am interested.
It's pretty smart. It's different, right? Because it's now kind of a research tool. Here's an article on Substack. God is hungry for context. It turns out that if you're going to use O3 Pro, you can't use it the same way as you would use O3 or other versions of OpenAI's AI. It really wants as much context, as much information as possible. So that's a good thing. But if you don't give it enough context, and this is something people have complained about, it will, this guy says overthink. I think it will hallucinate. It will, if you don't give it enough information, it will make stuff up. So really important to consider that and give it as much information as you can. This reminds me of the Apple paper that came out last week saying that thinking is hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you think too hard, something bad happens.
Yeah.
Turns out.
Yeah. The limitations, although there have been a lot of responses to it saying, well, it wasn't the best. It wasn't the best test, blah, blah, blah. Basically, the researchers who were from Apple gave the variety of models, not the latest models. It was Sonnet 3.7 and I think 3.0 for 3.0 for OpenAI. Some kind of common puzzles. In fact, I went out and I bought one just the other day. Let me go get it. I want to see if you can solve this.
Ooh. Interesting.
There he goes.
There he's gone, everybody. We run the show now.
Party time.
Towers of Hanoi.
Oh no, Dad's back.
On my coffee table, my whole childhood. Have anybody played with the towers of? Yeah, I'm a nerd. I know. Anybody played with the towers of Hanoi?
That was the sort of game people used to program in BASIC 40 years ago.
Yeah, it's a very simple game that a human can pretty quickly understand. I was a 6-year-old when I figured it out. The idea is you want to move this entire stack of disks to the far peg without putting any bigger disks on top of smaller disks. And it's actually pretty simple. The only key is which peg you start on. And that's the insight that maybe took me a little while to figure out. Depends if there's an odd or even number of disks left. But basically, it's repeating this process over and over. Whoops, the peg came out. That's what you get for buying cheap Amazon Towers of Hanoi pegs.
I kind of
like
want
this.
one of these.
This is great. So, and yeah, everybody who's done programming has probably solved this at one point. But apparently, the more disks, the worse and worse these AIs got. And in fact, they completely collapsed by the time it got to, I think, 7 or 8 disks. I think this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 disks. So I don't know. I think some of this is really just people assuming more. The AI can do more. Like it's going to be smarter than a human, right?
Look, there are powerful, not to sound all conspiratorial, but there are powerful forces in the technology industry that want you to believe that AI just kind of number goes up, expands, gets bigger, better, and eventually is superhuman and all of those things. But it's entirely possible that we've already discovered a lot of the things that AI does incredibly well, but that it can't be applied to everything and it doesn't always go up. And I think that's okay, because I'm one of those people. I'm not a skeptic or an AI boomer either. I'm very much like it's overhyped and also world changing. I think both are true.
It's both.
But there is definitely, you can feel like the clampdown happens when anybody dares suggest that it might have limitations. Some things might be inappropriate for it. Like people start to freak out in Silicon Valley. But I think we need to be open to the fact that we're in a boom right now, and what follows the boom is a bubble that collapses, and then you pick up through the rubble and find out the stuff that was actually useful. Because there's AI is, I used Cursor for the first time this week. AI is amazing.
That's the vibe coding editor that lets you code.
Yeah, and it edits my code right in line and shows me the changes, and it's amazing. But again, there are also places where we all know AI kind of flops, and this sort of research suggests, if you push it beyond a certain point, you eventually lead to a complete collapse. And it's I don't think it's the end of the world to say everything has its limits. But if your business is predicated on convincing investors that it doesn't have limits, then you're going to be upset by this.
I've been doing a lot of vibe coding lately, and overthinking is a real issue. I have some rather minor bugs, as far as I can tell, in my apps. And Replit, which I use when trying to solve a minor bug, will sometimes just sort of start digging more into the code it generated itself and making bigger and bigger changes. And I'll come back 20 minutes later, and it's caused many more problems than it's solved, because it's not good at pinpointing this one thing, and it doesn't know when it's spent too much time and invested too much energy in solving a problem in a way that's counterproductive.
There's also, I think, a group of people who are ready to go, aha, I told you so.
Of course.
Sure.
And they've been using this paper for that purpose. What happened is basically, it's called the illusion of thinking, understanding the strengths and limitations of reasoning models. These are these new reinforcement learning reasoning models that have emerged in the world ever since DeepSeek. And if you look at the graph, it just collapses. Even the regular AI collapses. Here's a perfect example. We'll zoom in on this. Claude 3.7, when it gets to 8 disks in the Tower of Hanoi, just zero. Can't solve any of them. Thinking Claude, a little bit better, but okay, when it gets to maybe somewhere between 10 and 15 disks, it fails. And neither, of course, can do a 20-disk Tower of Hanoi. Whereas a human, even a 6-year-old, once the human understands how it works, which doesn't take that long, can easily do it. But that is not, I don't think that's an indictment of AI.
No.
It's just a limitation.
LLMs can do incredible things. It is an incredible breakthrough, and they also can't do everything. And they can't do everything that OpenAI and Anthropic tell you that they can do, because those are the two most valuable, highly valued AI companies in the world, right? And so the thing that, and this is one of the things that I think Apple pulling back a little bit on AI and integrating it more directly is let's look at the things that LLMs are really good at and let's find ways to integrate those, even if we don't call it AI, into the operating system in ways that are measured, that are predictable, that are proven to actually, do some good things for you, is a good first step of where we're going. I mean, the AI, there are now 55,000 AI startups, according to Crunchbase.
That's
out there.
mind-boggling. Wow.
A bunch of them haven't, a lot of those haven't even launched their products yet. Maybe never will. Some certainly are going to. And then according to New York Times, there is $29 billion that has been invested in AI and is being invested right over the next this next phase that we're in. That is like 50%, as I understand it, of like the VC money. So it's hard to get VC money if you don't have AI in the name of the company right now. And so all of that leads to the bubble phenomenon that Jason Snell mentioned earlier. And like, we are going to hit the trough of disillusionment any moment now. And I think it's good that we're having conversations about what it does well, where it struggles, so that we can, modulate, calibrate the expectations around what these things, can do. Because otherwise, that's the difference between this sort of hitting the trough of disillusionment and sort of rising back up and finding things it's useful for, versus like the whole thing like crashing, the bus, sort of all the wheels coming off and it crashing in a fiery inferno into the traffic.
One thing that does worry me, it's fine if venture capitalists are swept up in the latest fad and it's their money, they're throwing it in there. But it does worry me a little bit when government goes all in on AI. And right now, that seems to be what our government is doing, choosing to use AI, for instance, to find fraud in Social Security applications. The Army has put together a new innovation corps, recruiting executives from OpenAI and Meta and other AI companies, Palantir. They're all, by the way, going to be lieutenant colonels. So congratulations, Colonel. Right. I do hope that this is experimental. They're interested, but they understand the limitations.
I think it's driven more by fear. Like that is like, we want to know what it can do, because what they don't want is they don't want another nation state sort of using this and having capabilities that they don't understand, or that
very similar to the argument used to create the Manhattan Project. Well, if we don't do it, the Nazis will, right? If we don't do the AI thing, China will. I don't know if that's the best reason to do it. I guess it's sensible. There are some good uses of AI. AI is making healthcare safer in the remote Amazon. I'm not talking about Amazon.com. I'm talking about the South American Amazon. This is from Rest of World.
The analog Amazon.
Yeah, the real Amazon. At overburdened clinics, pharmacists are using AI to catch dangerous errors, which seems a sensible use of it. I think AI is very useful if you understand the limitations, right? I think where we went wrong, perhaps, is with the consumerization of AI, the chat bots.
AI is great. It's the humans you can't really trust, because a lot of them
humans
don't understand it and misuse it and think it's capable of doing things it's not capable of doing.
Well, Elton John's not too happy, nor is Dua Lipa. The bill in the UK that Elton and Dua and others, including Paul McCartney, opposed, the drably titled, according to the BBC, Data Use and Access Bill. They wanted a amendment to the bill that would have forced tech companies to declare their use of copyright material when training AI tools, to say, hey, we're using copyright material. Without it, these creators argued tech firms would be given free rein to help themselves to content without paying for it. Elton John told the BBC that would be committing thievery on a high scale. The government refused the amendment. So Sir Elton is unhappy. So is Dua Lipa. I
don't think that regulators and governments, I just worry that they don't understand it well enough.
Yeah. Well, in that case, don't regulate. Or see, this is the problem. If you don't understand something, it's hard to regulate it. On the other hand, there's not a lot of time to solve this.
Yeah.
Understand it.
I should disclose, like the company that I work for, Ziff Davis, is suing OpenAI, right, for saying that what they did was not fair use, taking and ingesting all of our content and using it to train their models. New York Times is the other, entity that's done that as well. The courts will decide. So, but that aside, like that, this is one of the things that, and then Disney also, a big lawsuit against the infringement of their
Midjourney. They're saying Midjourney stole Darth Vader.
so you have a lot of this issue of, is it fair use for the AI companies to ingest things that are publicly available on the internet, but they don't have the rights, to use? Do they have the rights to use it is the question. A lot of that has to get worked out in the courts over the next couple of years.
Paper published last month by computer scientists and legal scholars from Stanford, Cornell, and West Virginia University studied whether 5 popular open weight models, 3 from Meta, 1 each from Microsoft, and Eleuther AI, were able to reproduce texts from books 3. That's the collection of books that's widely used to train LLMs. Those books still under copyright in many cases. In fact, they were able to reproduce Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone with many of these models. But see, that's the question. Are you going to use Llama 3 to read the book? No, you're going to buy the book. I don't know if this costs them business. And I guess, isn't that in the long run the real test of copyright? Is this going to harm my business? That's one of the tests for fair use.
For sure. Does it harm?
Exactly. Yeah. Does it harm?
So this is, sorry to bring it back to Apple one more time. One of the things they didn't talk about was image playgrounds. So last year, this is one of the most shocking things that they did last year, that I thought was really like across the line for them to go out and train on all of the data, open web of images, and to put that out there. I was really surprised they did it. I thought it was not a great move or just a good look, even because you figure a lot of that industry, right, builds their and the people who create a lot of that stuff creates it on Macs, and that's a lot of the groups of designers and artists and the people who stuck with Mac even when Mac was struggling, right? They were the only group that stuck with them, and to go and and I asked this pointedly last year to multiple people at Apple to make sure I understood it correctly. Like, did you train this on the open web? Like, did you just go out and scrape everybody's images who put their artwork out there and then use that to train your models? And essentially they said that yes, they did. Now people could, going forward say, oh, we don't want you to train on our data, now, but that was the thing that just really, to me, struck the wrong note, the wrongest note about OpenAI. But I did like the fact that they really didn't go back and touch that much, or maybe I don't know, Harry or Jason may have gotten more information, but my sense was that they've backed away from that a little bit, or at least haven't leaned into it, as much.
Yeah, they said something about honoring robots.txt going forward and things like that.
That's a must, I think.
Yeah. So, but I mean, you could argue it's the fruit of a poison tree, and that all of these models are in that, are in that sphere. I would love if they started building models out of licensed content from various companies and all of that. And that, I think that they're playing a little bit of a hedging game here too. Cause right, like Apple is seen as behind in AI, but so you kind of, if you're Apple, you need to build a model. But if it turns out there are lots of legal entanglements with these models, that benefits Apple, right? Because it maybe throws the brakes on a lot of their competition as well. So I think they're playing both sides right now. But I do think, we'll see how this policy changes. But again, the vibe was very much like last year was almost like a fever dream, and they're kind of coming out of it now.
Adobe is one of the few companies I know of doing a image generating LLM that, as far as I know, really is only training on things they clearly have rights to train on.
Yeah. Getty too is also doing.
Getty's also suing, doing and suing.
Yeah.
All right, one more break. No more Apple Reflux, and we got actually all I have is a bunch of silly stories to wind this up. So hang in there. This silly season about to begin. Our show today brought to you by Zscaler, the leader in cloud security. Hackers, just like everybody else, are using AI. Of course, they're using it to breach your organization. Not so good. AI powers innovation, drives efficiency, but it also can help bad guys deliver more relentless, more effective attacks. Phishing attacks over encrypted channels increased last year by 34.1%, fueled by the growing use of generative AI tools. Phishing as a service kits. Used to be you could say, well, if it's ungrammatical, it's bogus. They're never ungrammatical. They got AI, right? Organizations in every industry, from small to large, are fighting back. They're leveraging AI to increase employee productivity with public AI for engineers using coding assistants, marketers with writing tools, finance, creating spreadsheets and formulas. We're all automating workflows for operational efficiency across individuals and teams, embedding AI into applications and services that are customer and partner facing, and ultimately let these companies move faster in the market and gain competitive advantage. We're using AI like crazy at Twit. Companies, though, need to rethink how they protect their private and public use of AI. Chief Information Security Officer from the New York City Department of Education, they're on the front lines. He says, quote, with AI, I'm concerned about the usage of it, but I also love the innovation with it. How are employees using AI? Which AIs are they using? Zscaler can be a good partner there to help us find out the answers to those questions and to help us move faster when it comes to incident response and finding that needle in the haystack, proactively finding threats to our network and data. See, the truth is what we've relied on for years, traditional firewalls, VPNs, providing then public-facing IPs, are failing. They expose you and your attack surface to the bad guys, and they're no match in the AI era. So we need something better, and we need a more modern approach, and that's Zscaler's comprehensive zero-trust architecture and AI that ensures safe public AI productivity, that protects the integrity of private AI, and stops AI-powered attacks. Yeah, it does all three. Thrive in the AI era with Zscaler's Zero Trust Plus AI to stay ahead of the competition and remain resilient even as threats and risks evolve. Learn more at zscaler.com/security. That's zscaler.com/security. We thank him so much for supporting This Week in Tech. zscaler.com/security.
Impressive number of enterprise sponsors.
It's funny. In the early days of podcasting, it was all we call B2C, business to consumer, right? It was food boxes, mattresses, all that stuff. That stuff, I don't know if those businesses aren't any good anymore, or for some reason that advertising has dried up. We're very lucky that we're in the enterprise space and the technology space, because that advertising has not dried up. Yeah. Those people, you know why? Companies like yours have stopped publishing PC Week and all of those, enterprise-focused magazines. They're all gone. So where are these companies going to go to advertise? I mean, some of them go to CNN and stuff. It's funny how I see kind of pretty high-tech companies advertising on football games. I don't know if that's the best place for them to be.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good for brand name, but that's about it. So we're one of the, podcasting in general is one of the few places people can go to reach IT deciders, and we've got a lot of them. That's pretty much our audience. The rest of them are gamers. That's why we're so happy to say that the Nintendo Switch is now the fastest selling gaming console of all time. 4 days to 3.5 million units. Who says Nintendo is number 2 or number 3? That's pretty impressive.
I went to Best Buy this morning, and they had an enormous sign outside saying Switch 2 now available. And then the moment you go through the door, there's an equally large sign saying Switch 2 not in stock, which I'm pretty sure which one of the signs is correct.
Costco really made me mad. I went in there and they have a big Switch 2 display. And I thought, this is great. They've got some. Ran over. It was just the controller. They didn't have anything. Everybody's trying to. I don't think Costco's even selling the Switch 2. I don't think they're one of the retailers. Like it's Target, Walmart. Anyway, Nintendo thinks they're going to sell 15 million during its current financial year, even though I don't think it's that much different than the original Switch.
By design, almost. Like, I mean, remember the original Switch was already, quote unquote, behind the other consoles. And so this one is a tech upgrade. And I've heard from people who say when it's docked and it's on your TV screen, it's a major upgrade.
Yeah, it's 4K now. Yeah.
And like people love them and it's great. I mean, I was one of those people who I didn't want to make an effort to buy one. I just wanted to get one. And so I registered with Nintendo with my Nintendo account to just say, yeah, sell me one when you're ready. And I got that email a couple days ago. They're like, okay, we'll sell you one and ship it to you. And I'm like, great, send it my way.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
Hopefully in a week I'll get one and I'll have done it in the laziest way possible.
I've been searching my email every day since June 5th.
Maybe Nintendo for once will kind of at least sort of keep up with the demand in a way they usually do not.
Yeah, I think this is my big complaint about games stuff is, for Pete's sake, Apple can ship lots and lots of iPhones, and when you order an iPhone, they just say, okay, you'll get it in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. But it
wasn't that way from the beginning, was it?
It wasn't, but over time they've managed to do that. And like, I know there's a lot of theater involved and they want people lining up and stuff like that for these things, but honestly, I would love to go to Amazon or Target or Nintendo.com or whatever and just say, hey, here's my money, send me a Switch when you're ready. And they don't want to do it. This is the closest they've come. And I mean, kudos to them, because the word on the street is you can get one if you want, which the original Switch, that was not the case. It was real. I think it took like a year for me to get one of those. So.
Same for Nintendo Wii. It was like impossible to find forever,
Oh yeah.
Is this the email? Did I get it? Nintendo Switch 2 is available now. Buy now. I don't know. Is that the email? Or is it just an ad?
No, it's time to purchase your Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
And then the 3-day window to go and buy it, which I did.
Oh, yeah. Well, on behalf of my Nintendo Store team, thank you for registering. Wanted to let you know you're still in the queue.
Still in the queue.
Still in the queue.
A lot of people in the queue probably said, no, I've already got one, but I didn't. I bought one.
I would buy one if I could, but I can't. So there. Did you have 50 hours worth of gameplay?
Well,
isn't that the criterion?
I have. I mean, given that we have had the Switch for ages, and before that we had the Wii and the Wii U, and my kids play it, and like everybody plays it. And like, we were in there. We were grandfathered in. There was not a problem.
Nice job. All right, continuing on with the silly stuff. Let's see here. What else do I have? An experimental new dating site matches singles based on their browser histories.
Why not?
What could go wrong?
I mean, what could go right, Jason, is the real question. What could go right?
Browser dating users upload their 5,000 most recent searches, which are then turned into a browsing personality profile by AI.
Did Google write this?
Whose idea was this?
We're in the same ad pool. We're meant for each other.
Actually, I think it's one of those artists creating a art project.
Yeah, probably so.
Yeah. It's a browser dating artist and developer Dries de Porter, who's known for creating digital products with an eye for mischief.
I believe there is a lot of signal in what we do, other than the crippling privacy problems. I believe you probably could figure out how a browsing history correlates to making a match. It's probably not identical browsing histories, right? It's like complementary browsing histories. Sure. I'm sure there's signal in lots of stuff.
You're looking for a comb. He's looking for hair replacements. Something like that.
Well, that's going to lead you to a real gift of the Magi kind of situation, which you don't want. I guess blind date of the Magi, but still, I wouldn't recommend it.
If you want to know more, browser.dating. There's the dating website matching people based on the. Should I upload my browser history?
Don't do it.
Sure.
No.
What could go wrong? What could possibly go wrong?
Everything.
I am married, so that's probably the first thing that's going to go wrong.
It sounds more dangerous than 23andMe.
Yeah, it does. It's worse than spit. Just a heads up, Anchor is recalling 1.1 million of its power banks. We love Anchor power banks, but if you have the PowerCore 10,000 power bank with a model number A1263, there's a recall.
About this. They also have recalled in the past 6 months. They've also recalled a couple Bluetooth speakers because of these similar battery problems, and another power bank as well. So, if you have any Anchor power banks, think about, just make sure to check them. And
I have nothing but Anchor power banks everywhere in the house.
I think mine are only Anchor as
well. Here's one right here.
I'm not a hater at all.
This is not a a false alarm. The Consumer Product Safety Commission says Anchor has documented 19 cases of fires and explosions, including 2 minor burn injuries and 11 instances of property damage totaling more than $60,000. So if you've got one of those,
this is not an LLM hallucinating. This is
not a hallucination.
This is actually
This is the real deal.
Yeah. Real things have caught fire.
This isn't exactly a tech story, but I find it fascinating. New York Times today, a town's single largest taxpayer is also his biggest headache. Small towns are having a problem with deserted malls. Nobody wants to be in the deserted mall, but they can't redevelop them. Yeah. Timothy Sorrell, a town selectman and former rural police chief in Lanesboro, Massachusetts, population of 3,000, says, there were times you could not find a parking place in this mall. Inside, it was packed. For teenagers in particular, it was a place to hang out. I feel for teenagers. They don't have a mall anymore to go to.
Well, I think the challenge is that the malls, they're remember when there used to be 3 or 4 newspapers in a city and they went down to 1 paper?
Yeah.
Malls are like that. It's not that there's no malls. It's just that there used to be 3 or 4 malls. Now there's 1 mall.
Some malls are still thriving, but then there's another mall near us that's turning into a biotech campus, which
right. Didn't Rackspace turn a mall into its network operations center many years ago?
Well, so I don't know the last time you were down in Cupertino, but having just been down there,
tell me the prune yard is still there.
Just south of Apple Park is what used to be Valco Fashion Park, which is a mall. Yeah. And very slowly they are taking all of the property around the mall and turning it into high density commerce, residential. It's offices and restaurants and all of this and residential. The mall itself, the core mall, I think is still there because there's an ice center and a Benihana, but eventually it'll all be gone. Benihana never dies, baby.
You gotta have an anchor tenant. If it's Benihana, so be it.
Yeah, and ice skating and Benihana, but not together. Don't do them together. So, but they're doing it even in a place as wealthy as Cupertino. It's very easy to build that stuff and repurpose that land. I think the question with the story like the town in Massachusetts is, what do you do? And it's a little like the inner city cores that they're trying to turn office buildings into residents, like in Manhattan. The problem is a lot of those buildings are just not suited for people to live in. And so what do you do? And the mall, I love a mall. I love a caramel corn and an orange Julius, and I'm a kid from the 80s. I love a Chess King, whatever, but I wouldn't want to live there. So what do you do? I don't know.
Sad story. Benny and Gizmo have left the nest. This is where are they? This is the Eagle Cam in Big Bear Valley. No more Benny and Gizmo, the 2 eagles that were huge. This was huge. There's still 11,000 people watching this, even though there's no birds.
They should use the roofs of malls for bird habitats.
Wow. So of course this has spawned numerous think pieces. Still a little feather hanging in the wind, but that's about it. Think pieces here at Fast Company. You might have heard of them. What's next now that Sunny and Gizmo are leaving the nest? This was huge. This family of bald eagles. We covered it a couple of weeks ago. They were still there. But Sunny and Gizmo have moved on, as eagles will, as they do. They've left the nest. June 7th, Gizmo's turn to fledge. She practically fell out of the nest. Anyway, she landed nearby, and they're gone. They came back Monday for dinner, but their days are numbered. So I guess that's all I have to say about that.
Well, they spotted some peregrine falcons on the campanile at UC Berkeley, and this
there
is a
you
big
go.
Story because,
put a camera up
because they've had cameras for a long time. But the big story is that the bird flu has really killed a lot of the birds, and so they're trying to figure out like how it impacts the larger population, and like they spotted a new falcon that they'd never seen before on their cameras because the falcons who had roosted there for like 8-9 years vanished, and they figure that means that they got the bird flu and they died. So it's a huge it's like. I want to shout out all these people who love birds and have put these cameras in these places, because in some ways this is how biologists and scientists find out the impacts of things that are kind of hard to see, like bird flu, where you don't know what the birds are doing and how many there are because they're flying around and stuff. But some of these people are really making an effort to track them in places where they roost. In places.
Here is the unknown female visiting the campanile.
Yeah, and they're like, "Come on, stay. It's a nice place to have chicks." They've had many chicks there over the last 10 years. There's quite a Cal Falcons. There's a real great setup. They've got multiple webcams on the top. This is the campanile, which is it's an obelisk. It's the tallest building in Berkeley, and it's so the peregrines, which are the fastest birds, they love it up there. So hopefully somebody else
they
will
could
come.
see everything going on down there.
Yeah, because that's what they do is they attack other birds that fly lower. So they go up high and then they see the other birds and they swoop down and kill them.
I thought it was mice. I thought it was rats. They're going after birds.
They also they kill a lot of birds. They do. So, top 2 sources of bird death. 1, bird flu. 2, other birds.
Wow. And of course you are a proud alumnus.
I'm a Berkeley guy, so that's why I follow Cal Falcons.
The Cal Falcons.
I love it.
Yeah. We have red-tailed hawks here, but our crows, Lisa tells me, have chased the red-tailed hawks off.
I believe it.
They dive bomb them. Those crows are mean.
We have some imposing crows in this neighborhood.
Imposing? They're huge.
And I was just in Vancouver near the convention center where they have signs saying, "For God's sake, be careful about these crows and try to walk under the overhang, and we'll even lend you an umbrella to fight them off if you need one."
They're super smart. There's a crow. We have a street out here that I walk down, and apparently, I didn't know this crow's following me. like, it sits on this fence, looks at me, goes, "Ah!" And I walk half a block, and then it flaps around to ahead of me on the fence and goes, "Ah!" And I thought, what the hell? This is out of the Alfred Hitchcock movie. Turns out Lisa's been feeding this crow as she walks that way, and somehow the crow has identified me as related to Lisa and is now following me.
You have a similar smell now. That
I must smell like her. That's probably what it is. Well, on that note, thank you, gentlemen, for making this a quite enjoyable afternoon, despite the Apple reflux. Jason Snell will be back on Tuesday to talk about everything, and we're going to get in the deep nitty-gritty of it all on Mac Break Weekly. I look forward to that. And, of course, you already covered it on your own podcast. You can find out about all of Jason's podcasts at sixcolors.com/podcasts. And his written coverage, you and Dan, the Moose, you've all done a great job of covering this. Great place to go, sixcolors.com. Thank you so much, Jason. It's nice to see you on a Sunday.
Thank you, Leo. Nice to be here on a Sunday.
Did your team win?
Did my team? We did. We dominated in curling today. Actually, we really did. We blew it out. I made most of my shots. I do curling in Oakland every Sunday, and yes, that Olympic sport, and it's harder than it looks. But I nailed it. I'm going to go out this season on a high note. I think
the number one sport in Canada.
Winter Olympics coming next year.
Yeah. Do you throw the stones, or you sweep, or do you both?
Curling is a team sport, so 4 people play and they all rotate through. So you shoot a couple of stones and then you sweep a bunch of stones, and that's how it works. Yeah.
How fun!
It's great.
Yes.
People should check it out.
Yeah.
It's the best thing to watch on the Winter Olympics.
Really,
especially
curling
on silent. Like you can watch it silent.
Yeah.
And you're sort of like, it's like it's just oddly mesmerizing.
But every once in a while, somebody makes this impossible shot, and you go.
I mean, I thought they were impossible before, and then I did curling for a couple of years, and now they're just I don't even know what I'm seeing. They're so good at that. But I will say, yeah, my club and clubs I imagine all over the country are planning for next winter, because this is when people are curious about curling and they come out and learn, and that's what we did 3 years ago. So
when and where are the Winter Olympics?
It's February and I want to say it's in Italy, nice. France, in the Alps. I think it's in the Alps. But yes, so yeah, try curling. But curling tends to shut down in the summertime because most of the places they do curling, those people want to be outside in the summertime.
Yeah.
You're in the Bay Area, we can just do it all summer. But,
Jason, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Harry McCracken, the technologizer. You'll find his work at fastcompany.com, and he's on Blue Sky at Harry McCracken. Anything you want to particularly plug? I guess I want to read this article you're writing, an introduction to.
Yeah, sure. That quantum story. My newsletter, Plugged In, comes out every Friday. You can find that easily at Fast Company and sign
I'm
up.
a subscriber. You bet. Thank you, Harry. Great to see you.
Thank you. Thank you, Leo. I will. Thank you, Jason's.
And the other Jason Heiner, editor-in-chief, no dashes at ZDNet. Great to see you, Jason, and your TwitFez. He's a proud holder of a TwitFez.
Always a pleasure. Yes,
Very
and
nice.
The TwitFez, and someday in the back, maybe a Vision Pro. I don't know if it's a Newton or if it's a 1984 Macintosh.
Either way.
That's kind of my attitude,
historical,
by the way.
Either way.
Although
That's right.
I admit, I bought that Cube, got it home, and that day Apple announced they were discontinuing it. So
they never discontinued it. They just put it on ice.
I like it. I have a soft spot for that. That was a great computer. Thank you, Jason Heiner. You're all great. Really appreciate your time. Thanks to all of you who watch. As you know, we do Twit every Sunday afternoon, 2 to 5 p.m. Pacific. You can watch us. That's 5 to 8 Eastern and 2100 UTC. You can watch us live if you're in the club, in the Discord, but there's also open to the public, YouTube, live stream, Twitch, TikTok, X.com, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Kick, everywhere. But you don't have to watch live. There's on-demand versions of the show you could download from the website, twit.tv. There's a YouTube channel, a great place to go if you want to share just a clip with somebody and introduce them to the addiction that is called Twit. And of course, you could subscribe on your favorite podcast client. Do me a favor, though, if you do subscribe, leave us a review, a good one, I hope. As many stars as you can muster. That helps us spread the word. And after 20 years, it's easy for people to forget you even exist. I still, every week, hear from somebody say, "You're still around? You're not dead?" No, we're alive and kicking. So tell the world. We thank you for being here. Join the club if you're not a member. And thanks to all of our club members for the great support. We will see you next time. And I guess, as I've said for the last 20 years, and I'll say it again, another Twit is in the can. Bye-bye.
Amazing.